Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, I thought it would be a nice idea if you can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I was moving out of my old apartment, trying to get rid of some stuff I didn't want to drag to the new place. Posted a couch on Facebook Marketplace for cheap, just $50 if they picked it up. Some guy messaged me after like 20 minutes. His profile looked fine, a couple pictures, a normal sounding name, nothing weird. Said he could come that evening. I gave him the address without thinking much about it. Around 7 p.m., there's a knock. When I open the door, there's 3 guys standing there. Not one like I expected, 3. None of them looked like the profile pic either. The one in front, short and stocky, maybe late 30s, said, "Here for the couch." He didn't really look at me when he said it, just sort of stared past me into the apartment. The guy behind him was taller, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up even though it wasn't cold, and the third guy looked young, early 20s maybe, real skinny, hands jammed deep into his pockets. I hesitated, but it felt weird to just slam the door in their faces. I said something like, yeah, it's just in there, and stepped back a little. They didn't wait for an invite or anything, just walked right in. Not friendly, not even pretending to make small talk. Just straight in, like they owned the place. I pointed at the couch and tried to joke, "She's heavier than she looks." Nobody laughed. They just stood around it for a second, looking at each other. Then the front guy asked, "You live here alone?" Real casual, like he was asking about the weather. My stomach dropped a little. I just mumbled, "No, my brother's upstairs," even though I didn't have a brother and the building only had 1 floor. The guy didn't react, just nodded slow like he didn't really believe me but didn't care either. They didn't make any move to pick up the couch. Just kept standing there, looking around the room. The young skinny one wandered over toward the hallway like he was scoping the place out. I said, a little louder, "You guys need help with it or what?" The guy in front smiled then. Not a nice smile. "Yeah. Actually, you got anything else you're selling?" I shook my head. "Just the couch." He clicked his tongue, still smiling, and then said, "Mind if we look around?" Something about the way he said it made every part of me tense up. I stepped toward the door and said, "Nah, man, sorry. Just a couch." For a second, nobody moved. The one in the hoodie was standing way too close to me now, like he was waiting for me to turn my back. The tall one had drifted toward the kitchen, like he might just help himself to something. I forced a laugh and said, "Hey, you know what? I think I'm just gonna hang onto the couch." "Sorry, guys." I opened the front door wide. My heart was slamming against my ribs, but I tried to keep my face normal. "Thanks anyway." The guy in front didn't move. He just stared at me. Then he said, "Lo, you sure?" I nodded, kept my hand on the door handle. "Yeah, man. Sorry." It felt like forever, but finally he jerked his chin at the others. "Let's go." The skinny one hesitated, gave me this look I can't even describe. Like he was thinking about something, deciding. But then he followed the other 2 out. I locked the door the second it clicked shut. They didn't leave right away. I watched through the peephole, barely breathing. They stood outside the door for a minute, talking too quiet for me to hear. The guy in the hoodie kept looking around, fidgeting. Finally, they walked off toward the lot. I stayed by the door, listening. 5 minutes, 10. I didn't hear a car start. I cracked the blinds in the living room. My car was there. No sign of them. I called a friend who lived 10 minutes away and said I needed help moving the couch into the garage. Didn't even explain. He showed up 20 minutes later. When he pulled in, headlights sweeping the lot, I saw two figures standing at the far edge of the building, half hidden behind the dumpster. Same guys. They took off into the trees when my friend got out. We didn't bother moving the couch. We just loaded it straight into his truck. I stayed at his place that night. Came back the next morning and finished clearing the apartment with the door locked and a bat in my hand. Never saw them again. I started noticing it on a Wednesday. I was walking out of work, balancing my coffee cup and my bag, and there was this old silver sedan parked across the street. Nothing weird about that by itself. There's street parking all around the building, but what caught my eye was that it was running. Just sitting there idling, windows up, lights off even though it was starting to get dark. The guy inside was staring straight at the front door. I remember because when I glanced at the car, expecting maybe a delivery driver waiting for a pickup, he didn't move at all. Not even a blink. Just staring. I shook it off. Figured he was waiting for someone and didn't want to look obvious about it. I got in my car and drove home. The next day, he was there again. Same car, same spot, same deal. Engine running, lights off. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low so I couldn't see much of his face. I watched him for a few seconds before heading inside. Tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. Day 3, he was there before I even got to work. It was just after 7:30, barely light out, and the lot was still mostly empty. His car was parked farther down, closer to the entrance this time. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe he worked in one of the other offices on the block. But he wasn't carrying anything. No laptop bag, no coffee, nothing. Just sitting there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring. By the end of the day, I was uneasy enough that I asked one of the front desk girls if she'd noticed a silver sedan hanging around. She said no. Nobody else mentioned it either. I decided to leave out the side door that night. There's a little side lot that exits onto an alley, mostly used for deliveries. Less visible from the front. When I came out, I could hear the hum of an engine. Looked over my shoulder and there he was, creeping slowly along the alley in that same car. He wasn't looking at the road. He was watching me. I didn't even pretend to play it cool. I speed walked to my car, fumbling with the keys. The second I got the door open, I threw myself inside and locked it. He drove past without stopping, but really slow, like he wanted me to know he saw me. I sat there a long time before pulling out. When I finally did, I checked my rearview mirror constantly the whole way home. Never saw him behind me. Saturday and Sunday I didn't go out much. Half convinced myself by Sunday night that it wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, weird people exist. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe it wasn't even about me. Monday morning, I was a wreck getting ready for work. I almost called in sick. Told myself I was being stupid and paranoid. By the time I got to work, my stomach was in knots. His car wasn't there when I pulled in. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I parked close to the building and stayed in my car a few extra minutes, just watching the street. It was quiet, normal. Finally, I got out and went inside. Around 11, I was at my desk when Lisa from reception called me. She sounded weird, kind of whispery. "There's a guy asking for you," she said. I don't know, he's giving me a bad feeling. I felt my mouth go dry. "What does he look like?" She hesitated. "Silver car guy?" she said, like a question. I told her not to tell him anything and hung up. I didn't even think. I grabbed my bag and went to the back stairwell. not the elevators. I didn't want to be stuck anywhere. The stairwell was empty, echoey. I went down fast, trying not to make too much noise. I heard the building's front doors open somewhere above me, heard footsteps. Heavy ones. I froze, pressed myself into the corner by the railing. The footsteps came closer, slow. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. Like they knew I'd have to come out eventually. I didn't move. I barely breathed. After a while, the steps faded away again. I waited another minute, then bolted the rest of the way down. The alley behind the building was empty. I ran to my car, keys ready, got in, locked the doors. When I pulled out, I didn't see the silver sedan. For a second, I wondered if maybe it wasn't him at all. Then, 2 blocks down, I caught a glimpse of him in my side mirror. Parked at the curb, watching. I didn't go home. I drove around aimlessly for an hour, then went to a big shopping center and parked in the middle of the lot where there were tons of people around. Called a friend to come meet me. I wasn't about to go anywhere alone after that. When I finally went back to my apartment that night, my neighbor was outside smoking. He waved and said he'd seen a guy sitting in a silver car on our street earlier, just sitting there with the engine running. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound made me jump. Every shadow felt wrong. The next morning, I called in sick for real. Then I filed a police report. Gave them everything, his description, the car, the times. They said they'd look into it, but not much they could do without him actually doing something. For the next few days, I stayed with a friend. Didn't go back to work. I didn't see the car again. Not at my place, not at work, nowhere. I ended up quitting that job a few weeks later. Moved across town. Different commute, different neighborhood. Never saw the guy again after that. I don't know what he wanted. I don't want to know. I thought something died up there, like a squirrel or something. It was this weird sour smell that hit me every time I walked past the hallway near the attic door. My mom said it was probably just the heat. Old houses get weird smells when it's hot out. But it didn't smell like that. It smelled like trash and sweat. One night, after everyone was asleep, I decided to check. I didn't even tell anyone I was doing it because it felt dumb. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and dragged a chair into the hallway to reach the string that pulled the attic ladder down. The attic in our house wasn't finished. It was just beams and insulation and a few boxes of Christmas stuff. I hated going up there. Always felt like the air was too still, like it didn't want you breathing it. I climbed up real slow. When I poked my head through the opening, the smell hit me way harder. I swept the flashlight around, half expecting to see a dead animal. Instead, I saw wrappers. Not a couple, but a whole pile. Fast food bags, empty water bottles, a torn blanket bunched up near the corner. There were even a few dirty clothes balled up next to it. A hoodie. Some jeans. I froze. I didn't know what I was looking at for a second. My brain just refused to make sense of it. Then I saw the footprints. Fresh ones. In the dust covering the beams. They led from the little nest of trash right up to where I was. I scrambled down the ladder so fast I almost fell. Slammed it shut behind me and just stood there in the hallway, shaking. I wanted to wake my parents up, but I couldn't move. I just stood there listening, waiting to hear something from up there. I thought I heard a creak at one point, but it might have just been the house settling. It always made those sounds. I just never paid attention before. Eventually, I convinced myself that whoever it was, they were probably gone. Maybe they used the attic to hide out during the day and left when we were all asleep. That made it a little easier to sleep that night, even though I locked my bedroom door for the first time ever. The next day, I told my mom. She didn't believe me at first. Thought I was making it up to get out of chores or something. It wasn't until I dragged her up there and showed her the trash that she started to take it seriously. We called the cops. They came out and looked around, asked a lot of questions. They didn't find anyone up there, but they agreed someone had definitely been living there for a while. Maybe a few days. Maybe longer. That should have been the end of it. My dad installed a padlock on the attic door. We cleaned everything out. We even got one of those little security cameras for the hallway. I started to sleep a little better. Until about a week later, when I found the candy bar wrapper in my closet. It was tucked way in the back, behind my old school supplies. I only found it because I was digging for my art stuff. At first, I thought maybe it had just fallen from a jacket or a bag. But it didn't make sense. It was fresh. It still smelled like chocolate. And it wasn't a brand I ate. Ever. I sat there staring at it, heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to tell my parents again. They were already stressed out enough. So I decided to set a little trap. That night, I wedged a shoe against my closet door, just inside where you couldn't see it unless you knew it was there. If someone opened the door, even a little, the shoe would tip over. When I woke up the next morning, it was tipped over. I don't even remember grabbing my stuff. I just bolted out of my room and spent the whole day at my best friend's house. I told her everything. She offered to let me stay over, but I didn't want to make it a big thing. I figured I'd just sleep on the couch that night with the TV on. When I got home, my mom was in the kitchen. She said she found the attic padlock open that afternoon when she went to get some decorations down. Wide open. No sign of forced entry. The camera in the hallway? Dead. Batteries pulled out and tossed behind the couch. We called the cops again. This time, they brought dogs. They didn't find anyone, but they found the crawlspace door in the basement had been jimmied open from the inside. That night, I slept at my friend's house. A few days later, one of our neighbors told my dad he'd seen a guy sneaking around our backyard at night. Scruffy looking. Hoodie pulled up. Thought he was maybe casing the houses. My parents finally decided it was serious enough to move. We stayed with my aunt until they could find a new place. Before we left, I went back to my room one last time to pack the last of my stuff. I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything important. I found something tucked under my pillow. Another candy bar wrapper. Same brand. Neatly folded. I didn't tell my parents. I just zipped up my bag and left. I'm just going to get right into it because I can't shake the feeling that someone's still out there, and I don't know what else to do. I've never shared anything like this before, but I don't know where else to turn. It started with a date. It wasn't anything special, honestly. I met Tom on a dating app. We talked for a bit, seemed to have some things in common. He was polite, well-spoken, all the things you expect. We went to dinner, had some drinks. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. There was no spark, no chemistry. He wasn't rude or anything, but I could tell he was a little off. Maybe I was being picky, but I just didn't feel a connection. When the night ended, he asked if I wanted to meet again. I politely said no. I told him it was a nice evening, but I didn't think we were a match. He seemed fine with it, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled. He thanked me and we parted ways. That was it. Or so I thought. The next day, I got up, went through my normal routine. I'm a bit of a creature of habit, so I don't usually notice small things unless they're out of place. I went to work, came home, and that's when it hit me. I went to unlock my front door and the lock felt different. It wasn't the usual click when I turned the key. It was softer, as if it hadn't quite caught. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe I hadn't locked it properly when I left. But when I walked inside, I noticed the light in my living room was on, and I know for a fact I left it off when I left in the morning. It's a small thing, I know, but it made me pause. I checked all the doors and windows, double-checked the locks, everything seemed fine. But I had this feeling. You know that feeling when you're not sure if you've left the oven on? That uneasy, something's not right feeling? It was like that. I figured maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, I had a long day at work. Maybe I'd just forgotten to turn off the light or something. So, I tried to shrug it off. But the next day, things got worse. I got home in the late afternoon, walked in, and immediately knew something was wrong. My bedroom door, which I always close when I leave, was slightly ajar. I could have sworn I shut it all the way. My heart started pounding as I walked in. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. My bed was the same. The clothes I'd left on the chair were still there, but something was off. My drawer, the one where I keep my jewelry and a few personal things, was open. I always keep it locked, and I know I locked it that morning. The little trinkets I keep inside were shuffled around. Some were even missing. A necklace that my grandmother had given me was gone. I immediately checked my phone to make sure I hadn't left it unlocked or something. Nothing. No sign that anyone had come in while I was away. But my mind kept racing. How could the lock have been picked? I don't even know how to pick a lock, let alone someone else doing it without me noticing. I don't leave my windows open, and I live in a secure building with cameras in the hallways. I tried to calm myself down, but that's when I noticed something else. There were tiny scuff marks on the floor near the bed. Not much, just faint scratches, as if something heavy had been dragged across the carpet. It was too precise to be a random accident. I felt my stomach drop. My first thought was to call the cops, but I didn't have much evidence. What would I even say? Hey, I think someone broke into my apartment but took nothing except my necklace and messed with my drawer. I didn't want to seem like I was overreacting, but the fact that it was happening right after I declined Tom's offer for a second date kept creeping into my thoughts. I hadn't told anyone about him. I didn't even have his number anymore, but I remembered his last name, so I looked him up on Facebook. His profile was pretty standard, a few vacation photos, some family stuff, nothing that stood out. But as I was scrolling, something weird happened. He commented on a post from a mutual friend of mine, a girl I barely knew from work. The comment was innocuous enough, just a compliment about her dog or something, but it felt like a stretch. Like he was trying to connect with people I knew, even though we hadn't even been on a second date. It hit me, though he could have gotten my information from that app, but how did he know about my coworkers? I wanted to ignore it. I didn't want to think it was him, but I couldn't stop myself from feeling like he was involved. I sat there, staring at my screen for a good few minutes, debating whether I should block him or not. Before I could decide, I heard a sound from my hallway, a knock on the door. I froze. The timing was too strange. I hadn't been expecting anyone, and my neighbors rarely stopped by unannounced. I didn't feel comfortable opening it, but I peeked through the peephole, just to see if it was anyone I recognized. I couldn't see a thing. The knock came again, harder this time. I took a step back, my heart racing. My mind raced through all the worst-case scenarios. What if it was him? What if he'd somehow found me? I couldn't risk it. I didn't know what he was capable of. I called a friend to come over. She lived a few blocks away, so she'd be there in about 10 minutes. I wasn't about to open the door to anyone, but I didn't want to seem paranoid either, so I stayed as quiet as possible, hoping whoever was at the door would leave. They didn't. After what felt like an eternity, the knocking finally stopped. I waited a few more minutes before I dared peek through the peephole again. The hallway was empty. I didn't feel any better. I was scared, honestly. And I had this feeling, this terrible, heavy feeling that he was still out there, watching. I called the building security to see if anyone had been around, but nothing. No sign of forced entry or anything weird. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't stay there that night. I packed a bag and stayed at my friend's house, even though I was exhausted. I felt like I couldn't breathe in my apartment anymore, like it wasn't mine anymore. The next morning, I went back to my place with a friend, and everything seemed normal again. No strange noises, no new scuff marks. But I couldn't shake the thought that I was being watched. I didn't feel safe in my own home anymore. I haven't heard from Tom since I told him I wasn't interested in a second date. I've thought about reporting him to the police, but again, what could I say? No real evidence, just a gut feeling. I don't know what he wanted or why he's doing this, but I know one thing for sure. I don't feel safe anymore. And I don't know how to make it stop. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I was driving down a stretch of road that was pretty desolate. It's one of those highways that runs through a bunch of woods, no streetlights, barely any houses. I'd been driving for a while, just trying to get home from a work trip, and to be honest, I was starting to zone out a bit. The headlights of my car were the only light for miles, and the radio had been dead for a while. I was thinking about just getting home, maybe grabbing a snack, and calling it a night. That's when I saw her. I was going around a bend in the road when I noticed a car pulled over to the side. It wasn't just on the shoulder, it was kind of halfway off the road, like it had been there for a while. I could tell there was a woman standing by the car, waving her arms. I slowed down, not because I thought it was anything weird, but because it's just a decent thing to do. I've been stranded on the side of the road before, and when someone stops to help, it's a relief. So, I pulled over. The woman looked like she was in her early 30s, maybe. She was wearing a light jacket, and her hair was messy, like she had been out there for a while. I could see she was cold, the way she kept hugging herself. The car was a dark sedan, older, but nothing that screamed danger. At least, that's what I thought at first. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out as I rolled my window down. She turned and looked at me, her face a little pale. She walked closer, and that's when I noticed she was limping, like something was wrong with her leg. "I don't know what happened," she said, voice shaky. I was driving, and my car just stopped. "I think it's the engine. Can you help me?" I told her I could take a look, but something about the whole situation felt off. Her eyes were wide, like she hadn't been expecting anyone, and she kept glancing over her shoulder, like she was watching for someone. I got out of the car, locking it behind me instinctively. I've heard enough stories to know to stay alert, even if it doesn't always feel like a threat. She kept talking as I approached her car. "I tried to call a tow truck, but I don't have any service out here. I'm kind of stuck," she said. "Could you maybe give me a ride into town? It's not far. I can't stay out here by myself." I hesitated for a second. I had no reason to think she was dangerous, but my gut was telling me to be cautious. Still, I didn't want to be that guy who ignored someone in need. Plus, I was already out of my car, and I figured I could at least help her get somewhere safe. "All right, I can drive you into town," I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It felt off. Too quick. Like she was relieved I'd agreed too easily. As we walked towards my car, she asked me, "Do you mind if I sit in the front? I don't like being in the back when it's so dark." I said sure, and we both got into the car. I tried to make small talk, the usual stuff when you're stuck in an awkward situation. "What's your name?" I asked, looking over at her as I started the engine. "Rachel," she said, her voice sounding a little too flat. "You?" "Ben," I replied. I glanced at her quickly. She was staring out the window, her expression distant. We drove for a few minutes, the silence between us growing. I could hear the tires on the road and the occasional chirp of a cricket from outside. The kind of noise that would have been comforting if it wasn't for the tension in the car. "So, where are you from?" I asked, trying to break the silence. "Just around," she said, her voice sounding a little too stiff. I noticed she was clutching her bag really tight. The kind of way someone does when they're hiding something, but I couldn't see what. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe she was just nervous, but now that I look back, I can't help but feel like I missed something obvious. The road started getting darker, and it was just the two of us. No other cars. I was only a few miles from a gas station, but my headlights didn't seem to be picking up much, and everything felt too quiet. Then Rachel suddenly straightened up in her seat, her eyes locking on the road ahead. "Stop the car," she said, her voice low and sharp. I felt a wave of unease hit me. "What's wrong?" "Stop the car." "Right now," she repeated, more urgently this time. I slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking a little, but I figured maybe she saw something, an animal in the road, or maybe she just felt uneasy. She didn't say anything at first. Just stared out the window, not moving. I waited a few seconds. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my voice was shaky. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide and panicked. "You need to get out of here. They're coming." I froze. "What do you mean? Who's coming?" Before she could answer, I heard a noise. It was faint, but unmistakable footsteps, a few of them, crunching on the gravel behind my car. I looked through the rearview mirror, but saw nothing. My heart started pounding. Rachel started to panic now. "Please, we have to go." "They're not far." I didn't know what was going on, but I could feel the air getting heavier. Something was wrong. I turned the key, but the engine didn't start. I tried again, nothing. I turned it a third time, but still nothing. It was like the car had just died. Rachel looked at me with wide eyes, her lips trembling. "They've cut the wires. They know what we're doing. We're not going anywhere." I turned to her. "What the hell is going on?" Before she could answer, the rearview mirror fogged up for a second, and then there was a loud knock on my window. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned to look. Two men were standing there, just outside the window, their faces partially obscured by shadows. I don't know how, but I knew instantly that they weren't just guys. They were bad news. One of them smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile. It was like a smirk. He tapped the window again, and my blood went cold. Rachel's voice was a whisper now. "Get out. Now." I didn't think. I just threw the car into drive and slammed my foot on the gas. I could hear the men yelling behind me, but I didn't look back. I just drove, faster than I've ever driven before, until I hit the next gas station. I got out of the car, heart racing, hands shaking. I didn't even care if they followed me. I didn't even wait to get my bearings. I just called the cops and waited. The police showed up about an hour later, but by that time, Rachel was gone. The men weren't anywhere near the area either. They said there was no sign of anything, no abandoned car, no nothing. Like they just vanished. I don't know if I'll ever get over what happened last year. I'm still not sure how to process it, or if I should even be talking about it, but I guess it helps to get it out. So, it started like any other day. I'm a sophomore at this small college, and my apartment is kind of off the beaten path. I live alone, a one-bedroom unit that's about a 10-minute walk from campus. Nothing fancy, but it's quiet, and I like it that way. My routine's pretty standard. Classes during the day, a few hours of studying, maybe watching a movie or scrolling through social media before bed. I don't really go out much. I'm not the party type. One night, after I finished up some work for the next day, I went to bed around 11:30. Nothing unusual. My room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside my window. I remember falling asleep quickly, exhausted from the day, but I woke up around 3 a.m. for no real reason. I think I had to use the bathroom. When I got back to bed, I checked my phone, like I always do. I figured I'd scroll through Twitter for a bit until I got tired again. But then I noticed something strange. I had a bunch of notifications, more than I was expecting for that time of night. There were over a dozen new texts, all from the same number, and none of them were messages. They were all photos. At first, I just thought it was some kind of spam or a prank, but when I opened the first picture, I froze. It was a photo of me, asleep in my bed. I couldn't understand. I wasn't even sure how to process it. My first thought was that it was a mistake or some weird coincidence, but the more I looked, the worse it got. I scrolled through the images, and each one was taken from different angles, showing me asleep from various positions in my bed. There was one of me lying on my side, one from above, and one that had to have been taken through my window. My window that had been closed and locked. There was no way anyone could have been in my apartment without me noticing. Right? My heart started racing. I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I couldn't look away from the pictures. The strangest part? Some of the photos seemed to have been taken from places in my room where I was sure no one could have been without me hearing them. One of the pictures was taken from the corner near my dresser, another from the doorway. The oddest thing was the timestamps. They were all taken between 2:45 and 3 a.m., right when I had gotten up for the bathroom. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling my best friend, Kelsey, but she didn't answer. So I called the campus security number, but the guy on the phone didn't seem to take me seriously. He said something like, "Well, maybe you forgot you took the pictures yourself." I wanted to scream at him. I didn't even know how to explain how creepy it was. How could anyone have been in my room without me hearing them? And why would anyone do that? I deleted the photos, but that didn't help. They kept coming. I started getting more every few minutes. There were now dozens. Some were blurry, as if the person had moved too fast, but others were perfectly clear. I couldn't believe it. I started looking at the details in the photos, little things that shouldn't have been there. There was a faint reflection of someone's shadow in the glass of my window in one of the pictures. Another photo had a part of my door frame in it, but it wasn't taken from the usual angles of my room. It was like they'd been standing just outside my door. My hands were shaking as I held my phone. I couldn't even think straight. I kept hoping it was just a mistake, that someone had messed with me as a joke, but deep down, I knew this wasn't a joke. I was being watched, and I had no idea who was doing it or how they were getting in. I did the only thing I could think of. I moved to the couch and locked my bedroom door. I was paranoid now. Every little noise in the apartment made my heart race. I sat up the entire night, scrolling through the pictures over and over, trying to find any clue that might help me figure out who was behind it. But nothing came. The next morning, I went to class, but I couldn't focus. I felt like someone was following me. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see someone lurking behind me, but no one ever was. I didn't even want to go back to my apartment. I kept telling myself that maybe it was all just some strange coincidence, that it couldn't really be happening. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't a mistake. That night, when I got home, I checked my phone again. The photos were still coming. And now, there were videos. Short ones. My heart sank as I opened the first video. It was of me walking through my living room. Just me, walking to the kitchen for a glass of water, like it was a normal night. But I hadn't noticed anyone there, not when I was walking through the room. I could feel my pulse in my ears, the fear growing thicker in my chest. How was someone getting in here? How was someone watching me? I called Kelsey again, and this time, she picked up. I told her everything. She said I should call the police, but I didn't even know what to tell them. Someone sending me pictures of myself sleeping? It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. But I had to do something. I called the police, and they came to take a report. They checked my apartment, but they didn't find anything out of the ordinary. No signs of forced entry, no hidden cameras, nothing. I had no proof other than the photos, but they couldn't do anything without evidence. After that, I started getting more paranoid. I bought new locks for the doors and windows. I kept all the lights on in my apartment, even when I slept. And I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, just in case. But the worst part? The photos never stopped. They kept coming, one after another, until they just stopped. No explanation. No trace of whoever was doing this. I never figured out who it was or how they'd been in my apartment. It was like they vanished. But even now, sometimes when I'm alone, I feel like someone's watching me. And every time I check my phone, I wonder if it'll happen again. I've never been one to get easily spooked. I like to jog, usually in the mornings, just around the local park near my apartment. It's always been a routine, something I do to clear my head before starting my day. It's the kind of park that's well lit during the day, lots of families, dog walkers, and a few regular runners like me. I'm not fast or anything, but it's a nice, peaceful place to get some exercise. But this one morning, something changed. It started out just like any other jog. The sun was out, and the air was crisp, so I decided to go a little longer than usual. The park has this loop that's just over a mile, and I was planning on doing a few laps. Everything was fine at first. I didn't even notice the guy at first. He was just there, walking along the same path I was running on. He looked like he was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, and he had on a hoodie and sweatpants. Nothing too unusual. But then, I started noticing something weird. I went for my first lap, and I passed him near the entrance of the park. It was a little weird because we had crossed paths before, but no big deal. I just kept running, keeping my usual pace, when I looked behind me for a split second only to see him behind me, still walking. I figured, whatever, maybe he's just walking in the same direction. But then, when I hit the halfway point on my loop, I glanced back again. He was still there, only this time, he was walking a little faster, staying just a bit behind me. That's when I started to feel it. Something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just out for a walk too, right? It wasn't a huge park, and we were on one of the main paths. People get in each other's way sometimes. But then, after my second lap, I checked behind me again, He was still there. This time, he wasn't walking. He was jogging. And I swear, his pace matched mine. I picked up my speed just a little, trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. But every time I looked back, he was there, matching my pace exactly. He didn't even try to pass me, didn't go off in any other direction. He just stayed there, a few steps behind. At that point, I started to really feel my heart rate pick up. I tried to push myself harder, and sure enough, so did he. I couldn't figure it out. I was going faster now, running at a pace that would have been a little too much for a casual jogger, and he was still right behind me, barely out of breath. I thought about stopping, but something told me not to. Something in the back of my mind was screaming at me to just keep going. I rounded the bend by the big oak tree near the park's edge, and I thought for a second that I had lost him. I glanced over my shoulder once, and for a moment, I didn't see him. My legs were burning from the extra speed, but I felt a small surge of relief. But when I looked ahead again, I noticed something. He was up ahead now, farther than before, but walking. I wasn't sure what he was doing, but something about the way he was standing there, not moving but just waiting, made me feel uneasy. My instincts kicked in, and I decided it was time to end this jog. I had already done more than I planned, and whatever was going on, I didn't like it. I turned and headed toward the entrance, cutting across the park toward the street where my apartment was. As I ran, I kept looking behind me, just waiting for him to turn back into view. For a moment, I thought maybe I had gotten away. But then, as I was nearing the gate to leave, I saw him again. He was there, at the edge of the path, just standing. He wasn't running anymore, but he was watching me. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the way he was looking at me, like he was waiting for me to turn around again or do something, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was almost like he knew I was watching him, too. I didn't stop running. I didn't even slow down. I just kept moving, faster now, until I reached the gate, and I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment building, locked safely behind the door. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been following me for longer than I realized. The next morning, I went for another jog, but I didn't go to that park. I didn't even want to risk running into that guy again. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he mirrored my route, the way he never passed me, the way he seemed to be waiting, like he knew exactly where I would go. For the next few days, I tried to avoid that park entirely. But I didn't really feel safe anywhere. I kept thinking I'd see him around every corner, in every shadow. A week later, I decided I was being paranoid. It was a nice day, and I thought, okay, just go for a run like you usually do. You can't let this weird thing control you. So, I went back. I kept my pace slower, not wanting to overdo it or push myself too hard, and for the first few laps, everything seemed fine. But as I was rounding the loop, I saw him again. This time, he wasn't running. He was just walking, but I could see he was looking straight at me, his eyes following me as I went past. I didn't even try to pretend I wasn't scared anymore. I turned around and headed back the way I came, and the whole time, I kept expecting him to turn around and follow me. I didn't look back this time, I just kept running. I made it out of the park without incident, but after that, I didn't go back. I changed my route, and I stuck to places I knew. I told a few friends what happened, but they all shrugged it off. I know it sounds paranoid, but I've never felt that uncomfortable around someone before. It's been a while since then, but I haven't been back to that park. Something about it feels off now, like I'm not alone when I go there, even if no one else is around. I don't know if I'll ever get the courage to jog there again, but I don't want to risk seeing him again. Maybe it's just me being overly cautious, but I don't think I'll ever forget the way he watched me, like he knew exactly what I was going to do next. It was about 2:30 a.m. when my phone rang. I wasn't expecting any calls, and at that hour, I usually just let it go to voicemail, especially if it's an unknown number. But for some reason, I felt like picking it up that night. I probably shouldn't have. I answered with a groggy, "Hello?" There was a slight pause on the other end. Then, a voice I didn't recognize. It was low and smooth, almost too calm for someone calling at this hour. "Hey, John," the voice said, using my first name. "How was your evening? Did you enjoy dinner at that new place downtown?" I froze for a second. The voice didn't sound threatening, not at first. But how did this person know my name? My first reaction was that it was some kind of prank. I get those occasionally, telemarketers or random people trying to mess with you. I figured it was just one of those. "Ah, who is this?" I asked, still feeling half asleep. The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it asked another question. "I saw you parked outside your building earlier. You were there for about an hour. Had a few drinks, right? Pretty quiet night?" Now, that really put me on edge. I had only been out for a little while that evening. I went to a restaurant I hadn't been to before, sat at the bar, and had a couple of beers. It wasn't anything noteworthy, but I definitely hadn't mentioned any of that to anyone. It wasn't like I was keeping secrets or anything, but why would this person know about it? Who is this? How do you know where I was? I felt my pulse pick up a little. I wasn't sure if I should hang up, but something kept me on the line. Maybe I was just too curious to cut it off so soon. The person on the other end sighed, almost like they were annoyed by my questions. "John, you really should be more careful. People can get hurt when they don't pay attention to the little details. Like the way you left your door unlocked earlier." My heart dropped into my stomach. My door was unlocked. I always lock it when I leave, but sometimes I'm careless when I get back, especially if I'm in a rush or distracted. But how would this person know that? "Who are you?" I demanded. My voice was shaking now, and I couldn't tell if I was angry or scared. "I'm just someone who's looking out for you," the voice said. It was strange, almost soothing in a way that made it worse. But if you're going to keep being careless, things could get a lot worse. At this point, I felt a cold sweat creeping up my back. It didn't make any sense. There was no way this person could know these things. But then my mind started racing. Had I been followed? Had I seen anyone on my way home? No, I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. I tried to think back to the day. I had stayed in the office late, left around 7 p.m., stopped by the bar, and then came home. Nothing unusual. But this person was still talking like they knew my every move. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to stay calm. "Leave me alone." Another pause. Then the voice spoke again, this time in a low, almost conspiratorial tone. "Maybe you should check your apartment. The kitchen light's on, isn't it?" I didn't even know what to say. I just stood there, staring at the phone, not knowing if I should hang up or if I should go check the kitchen. My legs were already moving, even though my mind hadn't fully processed what was happening. I didn't want to look, but I also didn't want to ignore the possibility that something was wrong. I slowly set the phone down on my kitchen counter and walked down the hall to the kitchen. My heart was beating in my throat. When I stepped into the kitchen, the light was indeed on. I never leave it on when I leave, and I definitely didn't leave it on when I got home. My stomach turned. I stepped back into the living room, picked up the phone, and put it to my ear, barely able to breathe. "You're in my apartment, aren't you?" I said quietly, almost to myself. "Maybe," the voice said, still calm, like they were savoring the discomfort in my voice. Maybe I just want to make sure you're safe. After all, you've been careless, John. I felt a wave of nausea. I should have called the cops. I should have ended the call and done something, anything. But I was frozen. This felt so unreal, but at the same time, it didn't. It felt too real. I needed to understand what was going on. I needed to know if this person was really here, or if they were just messing with me. You're still there, aren't you? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm always here, the voice replied. I'll be here, watching. You can't keep everything hidden, John. Not forever. I didn't say anything. My mind was racing, trying to think of something, anything to do. But I didn't know what. There were so many questions. Who was this person? How did they know everything? How long had they been watching me? And, most terrifying of all, had they really been in my apartment? Had they been there when I got home? I wanted to run. I wanted to do something, but I couldn't move. I kept my eyes on the door, thinking that if I stayed still enough, I might not be noticed. But then the voice came again, this time a little softer. Check your front door, they said, almost in a whisper. My stomach dropped again. I hadn't heard anyone outside, but I didn't need to. I couldn't ignore the cold pit forming in my gut. Slowly, I set the phone down and walked toward the front door. As I approached, I noticed that the lock wasn't quite latched all the way. It was like someone had just been there, testing the lock, but hadn't fully opened it. My heart was in my throat now. This was real. Too real. I turned back to the phone, nearly dropping it. Who are you? I whispered. But the line was silent. No reply. The call had ended. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the next few hours checking every corner of my apartment, making sure every window and door was locked tight. The next morning, I called the cops. They came over and did a quick sweep of the place, but they couldn't find any sign of forced entry. No fingerprints. Nothing. They said it was probably just some prank. They suggested I change my number and be more careful. I don't know if they believed me, but I know what I heard. That person knew too much. I don't know if they were actually in my apartment, but I can't shake the feeling that they were. I still get the occasional unknown call. I don't pick up anymore. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. I mean, nothing really ever happened to me before, and I had always parked in the same spot outside my apartment. But it started with small things. The kind of thing you might dismiss if it happened just once. I live in a relatively quiet part of the city, nothing too fancy, just an old building with some students and young professionals like me. Parking can be a hassle sometimes, but there's a spot just outside that's usually available. So, I'd leave my car there, sometimes for days at a time if I wasn't going anywhere, and go about my business. The first thing I noticed was the way my cup holder kept getting moved. I always kept a small bottle of hand sanitizer in there, along with a pack of gum. But one day, I came out to my car and saw the sanitizer had been placed in the center console, with the gum pack now sitting neatly on the passenger seat. It seemed odd, but I told myself I was probably just forgetting things. Maybe I had done it myself and just didn't remember. It wasn't until a few weeks later that it happened again. I'd been at work for a good 9 hours, and when I got back to my car, something felt off. I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong right away, but as soon as I sat down, I noticed it. My bag. My purse, actually. It was sitting on the passenger seat. It was a small bag, just a basic crossbody I'd been using for a while. But this time, it wasn't just sitting there. It was zipped open. I always kept it closed. Always. I was sure of it. I checked the contents right away. Nothing was missing. Not that there was much to take anyway, just my wallet, phone, and some lip balm. But the fact that it was open, and that I hadn't left it that way, made my skin crawl. Still, I convinced myself that maybe I had just forgotten to zip it up, that maybe I was being a little dramatic. But the unease lingered. It always does, doesn't it? Then, it got worse. A few days later, I had just parked my car and was about to head inside when I noticed the rearview mirror. It was slightly tilted. Not a lot, just enough that I noticed it. I thought, okay, this is getting weird. I couldn't help but think back to the open purse. Had someone been in my car? I scanned the area around me, but everything seemed normal. No one in sight, no broken glass, nothing obvious. I started checking my car every time before I got in, but nothing seemed out of place. It was only when I got into the habit of checking the rearview mirror, of all things, that I noticed the next change. The sunglasses I kept on the dash were no longer there. They weren't in the glove compartment, they weren't on the seat, nowhere. But when I got into my car the next day, they were back, sitting neatly in the cup holder. I was so confused. That's when I realized someone had been inside my car. But they weren't stealing anything. They weren't even leaving signs of force. There were no broken windows or damage to the lock. Whoever was doing this was careful, methodical. The next time it happened, I was done ignoring it. I decided I needed to check the parking lot security cameras. There was a little corner store next to the building that had cameras that faced the lot. The owner was a guy in his 50s, always sitting behind the counter, watching people come in and out. I talked to him a couple of times, but he didn't really know me. I walked over to the store and asked if he'd let me look at the footage. He hesitated but agreed after a bit of convincing. I explained what had been happening to my car, though I left out the weirder stuff to avoid sounding crazy. He checked the footage from the past week. We watched as cars came and went, but when we got to the footage of my car, we saw something that made my blood run cold. Around 2 a.m., a figure approached my car. I couldn't make out much, it was too dark, and the figure was mostly obscured. But I could see the outline of a person fiddling with something near my driver's side door. The person then walked away, as if nothing had happened. No damage, no sign of a break-in. Just a person walking to my car, touching it, and then leaving. I couldn't believe it. Someone had been in my car over and over again, and they'd never left a trace. The footage didn't show anyone entering the car, but it was clear someone was messing with my things. It was like they knew exactly what they were doing. After that, I started taking extra precautions. I never left anything in the car unless I absolutely had to. I made sure everything was locked up tight. I even started parking a little farther from my building, thinking maybe that would help. But it didn't. It got worse. One day, I came out of my apartment to find my car's glove compartment open. Not just cracked, but wide open. And the contents were scattered across the passenger seat: papers, receipts, a couple of old pens, my insurance card. Everything was spread out like someone had gone through it all and then decided to leave it like that. The worst part was the note. It was folded up and stuck inside the little map pocket on the door. The handwriting was strange, careful but messy, almost too neat. It said, "I like the way you organize things. It's almost perfect." Almost. I was sick. Someone had been watching me. They were leaving notes, touching my stuff, moving things around like it was some kind of game. I couldn't figure out why. What did they want? I wasn't rich. I didn't have anything valuable in the car. But somehow, I felt violated, like my privacy, my space, was being ripped apart piece by piece. I took that note to the police. They weren't exactly helpful. They said they'd look into it, maybe do a little more surveillance, but it wasn't like they had anything to go on. There were no fingerprints. No sign of forced entry. No direct evidence that anything criminal was going on, just a messed up note and a bunch of unsettling rearrangements. The only thing they suggested was putting a tracker in my car or setting up a security camera. I couldn't afford a camera, and the tracker felt like an invasion of privacy. I wanted to handle this without making it more of a spectacle. I started getting more paranoid, though. Every time I came back to my car, I would inspect it. I couldn't help it. My hands would shake as I checked the glove compartment, the seats, the cup holders, the rearview mirror. I was obsessed. But the worst was when I came out one night and found a message on the windshield. You should have locked the door. That was the final straw. I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. I left my apartment for a week and stayed with a friend. I didn't even go near my car. When I came back, I found that the note had stopped. The car was untouched. It was like the person had disappeared. It was one of those nights where everything felt off. I'd just gotten off a long shift, and all I wanted to do was get home, collapse into bed, and forget about the day. The building where I worked is pretty quiet after hours, so when I walked to the elevator, I was relieved that I wouldn't have to deal with the usual crowd of people. The elevator dinged as I pressed the button for the ground floor, and the doors slid open. Inside, there were two people already standing there. One man, probably in his early 40s, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans, and a woman, maybe a little older than him, with long, dark hair and a tired expression. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't unusual to share an elevator, especially at that hour. I stepped in, and the door slid shut. I pressed the button for the ground floor and turned to face forward. There was an awkward silence as the elevator started moving down. I was too tired to try to make small talk, and neither of them said anything either. I just wanted to get home. It wasn't until the elevator reached the second floor that I noticed the man glance at me. Not like a normal glance, but one of those stares that lingers just a second too long. I glanced at him, trying to figure out why I felt so uncomfortable. He didn't smile or acknowledge me in any way, but his eyes just stayed on me for a second longer than they should have. The woman was staring down at the floor, her arms crossed. I didn't think much of her at first, but now that I looked closer, I noticed that she was trembling slightly. Not visibly shaking, but there was something in the way she held herself that made me uneasy. The elevator kept descending. 3rd floor. 4th floor. Every time the doors slid open, the same thing. No one got on. Just the three of us. And the silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. Then, as the elevator approached the 5th floor, I felt the air change. The tension was so thick it made my skin crawl. I could feel both of them watching me. I turned to look at them again. The man was staring straight ahead now, but his hands were clenched into fists by his sides. His whole body was tense, like he was waiting for something. The woman's eyes darted between me and the man, like she was trying to gauge something. The elevator stopped with a small jolt. 5th floor. The doors didn't open, though. They didn't even try to. I turned to press the button for the ground floor again, but nothing happened. The button was unresponsive. I pressed it harder, but the lights didn't flicker. The elevator just sat there, silent. Are we stuck? I asked, glancing between the two of them. My voice felt too loud in the silence. Neither of them said anything. The man was still staring straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The woman's hands were clenched now, her eyes wide. She looked terrified, but I couldn't tell if it was because of me or something else. I waited for a moment, expecting one of them to say something, but they didn't. I pressed the emergency button, but it didn't make a sound. Just a quiet, unbroken hum of the elevator's lights. I think we should, I started, but the man interrupted me. Don't press that, he said, his voice low. I froze. His tone wasn't angry, but there was a hard edge to it. Like he was warning me not to do something. I looked over at the woman. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring straight ahead, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. She looked like she was on the verge of crying, and that made the whole situation feel even weirder. Look, can you just let me out? I asked, now starting to feel genuinely freaked out. The man didn't respond right away, but the tension in the elevator only grew thicker. Why don't you just stay with us for a little while, he said, his voice strangely calm, almost too calm. I didn't know what he meant by that, but I felt my stomach twist. I stepped back instinctively, trying to get some space between us. Hey, I'm just trying to get home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my heart beating faster. You're scaring me, all right? I need to get out of here. The woman suddenly spoke up, her voice shaking. It's too late for that. I turned to her, my anxiety rising. What does that mean? What the hell is going on? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the man, and he gave her a small nod, like they were communicating without words. I backed up further, my back now pressed against the wall. I couldn't escape. There was no way out. I kept pressing the emergency button, desperately now, hoping someone outside would hear it. But there was nothing. Just the same quiet hum of the lights. The man took a slow step forward, and I flinched, my heart racing. I told you not to press it, he said again, but this time his voice had changed. It was quieter, almost soothing in a way that didn't feel right. Let me out, I said, more urgently this time. Please. But instead of moving toward the door, the man reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small object. I couldn't make out what it was at first, but when he moved closer, I saw it, a knife. Not a big one, just a pocket knife, but the sight of it made my blood run cold. My mind raced. I didn't know if I was in real danger, or if I was just panicking, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the sweat on my palms. The elevator was so small, and they were blocking me in. The woman was still standing there, looking at the floor, her hands trembling. The man stepped closer, and I could see his eyes now. There was no emotion in them, just cold indifference. I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. Then, just as I was about to move toward the corner of the elevator, the lights flickered. For just a second, everything went dark. Then they flickered again, and I heard the unmistakable sound of the doors opening. The man stopped in his tracks. I didn't wait. I shoved my way past them, adrenaline flooding my body. I didn't even look back. I just ran out of the elevator, down the hallway, and didn't stop until I was outside in the parking lot. My legs felt like jelly, but I didn't care. I kept running. I didn't stop until I was in my car, locked inside. My heart was still pounding as I fumbled for the keys, trying to calm myself down. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out of there when I did. Maybe they were just playing some sick game. Maybe they were just messing with me. But I don't care. I don't want to know. I haven't gone back to that building since. I don't even care if I have to find another job. I won't go back there. I'll never take that elevator again. It started with just one poster, tacked up on the community bulletin board near the coffee shop I go to every morning. I didn't think much of it at first. It was the kind of thing you see from time to time, lost pets, missing keys, that sort of thing. But when I took a closer look, I froze. It was a missing person poster. I knew it wasn't meant for me at first glance, but then I saw the photo. It was my photo. The picture on the poster was one I'd posted on my social media a few months ago. The one from that hiking trip I took up to the mountains. I had no idea how someone had gotten it, or why they'd use it for a missing person poster, but there it was. My face, a grainy, black and white version of it, with the words, missing. Last seen in the neighborhood. Contact if you know anything. I should have ripped it down. I know that now, but at the time, I felt like I was in some kind of weird dream. I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and say it was some kind of joke, but there was no one there. I stood there for a minute, staring at it, trying to figure out what to do. I eventually decided to just take a picture of it, mostly so I could show my friends later and laugh about it. I figured it was just some prank. A few hours later, I found another one, this time on a telephone pole near my apartment. Same picture. Same words. That's when the anxiety started creeping in. Why were these posters showing up everywhere? Was someone trying to mess with me? The logical part of my brain told me it was a prank, someone who had a strange sense of humor. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Something wasn't right. I asked my neighbors if they'd seen anything. A few of them said they had noticed the posters, but nobody seemed too concerned. It was just one of those weird things that happens, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too specific to be random. The next morning, I went out for my usual jog. When I passed the little park down the street, I saw another poster. And then another. They were everywhere. On every tree, every sign, every lamppost. My face, staring back at me from all directions. I started to panic. I couldn't figure out how anyone had gotten all these copies of my photo, let alone plastered them all over the neighborhood without anyone noticing. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I ran home, locked my doors, and sat down to think. Maybe someone had taken a picture of me without me realizing. But how could they have gotten so many? I didn't go out that often, and I'd never seen anyone snapping photos of me. I checked my social media accounts again, but everything seemed normal. No strange messages, no weird follows, no requests for information. But the posters kept coming. Day after day. Each time I left my apartment, there was one more. They were in all the usual places, and sometimes in new spots on the side of buildings, on benches, even inside a few stores. I started feeling like I was being followed. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I thought I saw someone ducking behind a corner, someone watching me from a distance. The familiar faces of my neighbors began to look unfamiliar, like I couldn't trust anyone. I decided to go to the police. I wasn't sure what else to do. They didn't seem overly concerned at first, though. One of the officers just shrugged and said it was probably a joke or some kind of publicity stunt. But when I told them that I hadn't given anyone permission to use my photo, and that I had no idea who was doing this, they agreed to look into it. A week went by without any new developments. The police didn't find anything useful. No fingerprints, no surveillance footage, nothing that would point to a suspect. But the posters didn't stop. They kept showing up, and every time I thought they were finally gone, more would appear. It was like whoever was doing this was always one step ahead of me. One evening, about 2 weeks into this strange situation, I got a call. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me I needed to pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice shaking. There was a long pause before the voice on the other end responded. "Stop looking for me." The voice was low and calm, almost bored. I felt my stomach drop. "What? Who is this? You don't need to know who I am. You just need to stop." I could barely speak. I didn't know what to say. Stop what? Stop trying to figure it out. You've seen the posters. You've seen the signs. Now, stop. You're wasting your time. I didn't know what to say to that. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I hung up, my hands trembling. The next day, I came home to find a package on my doorstep. It was a plain brown box, no return address, nothing to indicate who had left it there. I opened it, heart pounding. Inside was a stack of papers, more missing person posters, all featuring my face. But this time, they were different. They had notes written on them. Notes like, "Don't run. Don't hide. You're already gone." That's when I knew this wasn't some random prank. Someone had been watching me for weeks, and they knew things about me that no one else could. They knew what I looked like without makeup, without my hair done. They knew where I lived, where I went, everything. I called the police again, but they couldn't offer much help. They'd investigated, but everything they had checked led to dead ends. They told me to take extra precautions, lock my doors, be aware of my surroundings, but nothing more. I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and left. I stayed with a friend for a few days, but it didn't matter. The posters kept showing up, even in places I'd never been. I couldn't escape it. After a few weeks of this, the posters finally stopped. Just stopped. They didn't appear anywhere anymore. No new phone calls, no more notes, no more signs. It was like whoever had been doing it had just disappeared. I still don't know who did it or why, but I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, watching, waiting. Every time I step outside, I look over my shoulder, half expecting to see my face staring back at me from a poster. I've always liked camping alone. Something about being out there, surrounded by trees and silence, makes everything feel simpler. Last summer, I decided to go on a solo trip to a remote campsite I'd been to a couple of times before. It's a small, quiet spot deep in the woods, far from the usual hiking crowds. Just the perfect place to disconnect. I arrived in the late afternoon, set up my tent, and started a fire. It was one of those warm evenings where the air smells earthy and the breeze feels soft against your skin. The fire crackled, and I sat there for a while, enjoying the quiet. My phone had no signal, and it felt great. No distractions, just me and nature. I cooked a simple dinner, a can of chili I brought along, and as the sky grew darker, I settled in with a book, my feet propped up near the warmth of the flames. I'm not someone who scares easily. I've been camping alone before, so the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl, the snap of a twig didn't bother me. If anything, it was comforting. But as the night wore on, things started to feel off. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. The firelight flickered oddly, as if it was struggling against the wind. But the wind wasn't strong enough to put the fire out, and there wasn't much of a breeze anyway. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just tired. Maybe it was the stress from work catching up with me, or maybe I was just jumpy from being alone in the dark. I finished my book, threw a few more logs on the fire, and retreated to my tent around midnight. I made sure everything was zipped up tight and crawled into my sleeping bag. The warmth of the fire still lingered, and I felt safe in my little tent. The noise of the night was calming again, nothing out of the ordinary. The sound of insects, the wind through the trees. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard something. It was a faint rustling sound, barely perceptible. At first, I thought it might be an animal, maybe a raccoon or something small rooting around nearby. I've heard animals before, especially at night, so I didn't think much of it. But the sound didn't go away. It started to grow louder, closer. And then, just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard it. A distinct crunch of footsteps in the dirt. It wasn't like the usual sounds of animals moving about. This was deliberate. A person's footsteps. My heart skipped. I told myself it was just someone else camping nearby. Maybe they were walking to the bathroom or their tent. But the sound didn't stop. It kept coming closer, step after step. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide their presence. I could hear the footsteps clearly, right outside my tent now. I stayed perfectly still, listening. The air in the tent felt thicker, like I couldn't breathe properly. I wanted to call out, maybe yell and ask if they needed something, but I couldn't make myself do it. Something felt wrong, and I didn't know why. My hands started sweating, and my chest tightened. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. But there was nothing. Just silence. I waited what felt like an eternity before slowly unzipping the flap of the tent just enough to peek out. I didn't see anyone. The fire had dimmed significantly, but I could still make out its glow in the distance. The surrounding woods were dark, the trees heavy with shadows. No movement. No one was there. Relieved but still unsettled, I zipped the tent back up and tried to go to sleep. I told myself it was probably just some other camper, someone getting too close without thinking. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave me. I stayed up for a while longer, listening to the noises of the forest, trying to convince myself everything was fine. At some point, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to find the air cooler than I expected. I unzipped the tent and poked my head out. The sun was rising, the light still weak through the trees, and everything seemed normal. Except for one thing. My fire was completely out. I know that's not completely unusual for a fire to burn out overnight, but when I left it, the flames were still going strong. I'd even put a few extra logs on it before going to bed. But now, the fire pit was cold and ashy, the wood damp. There was no reason for it to have gone out so quickly, especially since the night hadn't been windy. I stood there for a second, trying to shake off the creeping feeling in my gut. My gear was still scattered around the campsite, nothing out of place except the fire. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were muddy footprints. Fresh ones. Leading right up to my tent. They were clear, deep impressions in the dirt, large enough to tell that whoever had made them was wearing boots. The prints weren't from an animal, they were human. And they were unmistakably heading straight to my tent, like someone had walked right up to it during the night. I felt dizzy. My mind raced. I looked around, but the campsite was empty. There was no one in sight. The area was still. The footprints didn't just stop at the tent, they continued on, circling around the perimeter of it, as if whoever had been there had walked all the way around, inspecting it. I knelt down to look closer, my hands shaking. The footprints weren't deep enough to indicate that the person had been running or hurried, but they were definitely fresh. Too fresh. I hadn't heard anyone leave, and the ground was soft from the recent rain, so the impression should have been clear. But this person had taken their time. They'd circled me. I immediately thought about packing up and leaving, but a part of me froze. What if they were still nearby? What if they were watching me right now? I stood there, staring at the footprints, the silence around me deafening. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, each one worse than the last. I grabbed my things as fast as I could. I didn't even try to make breakfast. I just shoved everything into my pack, practically running to my car. I was shaking, nauseous with the idea that someone had been so close to me during the night without me knowing. The worst part was that I hadn't heard anything while they were outside. No talking, no rustling, no movement except for those footsteps. Whoever it was had been quiet, patient, and deliberate. When I finally reached the parking lot, I looked around one last time. The woods stood still, quiet as if nothing had ever happened. But I couldn't shake the thought of those muddy prints. How long had that person been out there? How close had they gotten? I didn't look back as I drove away. I couldn't. I had just moved into a new apartment a few weeks ago. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. Honestly, I was pretty excited about it. It was a change, a fresh start, you know? I didn't really know anyone in the area yet, and I had been spending a lot of time unpacking and getting settled. One night, after a long day, I was too tired to cook and decided to order some delivery. It was one of those nights where you just want something quick and easy, and that's exactly what I did. I ordered from this local place I had been wanting to try. It wasn't anything special, just a burger and fries. You know, the kind of comfort food that hits the spot after a busy day. The food showed up right on time, and I was happy enough to dig in and finally relax. The delivery guy seemed normal enough. He was a little older than I expected, maybe in his mid-40s. He wasn't exactly chatty, but he handed me the bag of food with a quick, polite "here you go" and left. Nothing weird. Just another delivery. I shut the door, went to the kitchen, and started eating my food in front of the TV. Everything seemed fine, but for some reason, I kept hearing a noise outside. It was soft, almost like a distant hum. At first, I thought it was the neighbors, maybe their TV or music leaking through the walls. But when I listened closer, I realized it was coming from outside, near my window. I didn't think much of it at first. I'm not the paranoid type, but it was a weird thing to notice. The sound was soft, like someone was pacing around, but I couldn't quite pinpoint where it was coming from. I figured it was probably just the wind or something, but after a few minutes, I felt a weird sense of unease creeping in. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my food and the show I was watching. But the noise didn't stop. It wasn't constant, but it came in waves, like someone was walking back and forth outside. I glanced at the window, but the curtains were drawn. Still, the noise didn't stop. I felt my eyes keep flicking back to the window, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The delivery driver's car was still parked outside. At first, I figured he'd just parked there for a moment and was leaving, but after 10 minutes, he was still there. I felt a little weirded out, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or maybe he had just stopped for a break. But after half an hour, he was still sitting there in his car. It was dark by then, and I couldn't see much, but his car lights were on. I couldn't figure out what he was doing, and the longer I stared at the car, the more unsettling it felt. I hadn't even thought to check the time when he first delivered the food, but now it was starting to feel like a lot of time had passed. Another 10 minutes went by. I couldn't focus on my food anymore. I kept staring at the window, the dark shapes of the tree branches outside swaying with the breeze. I thought maybe I should go over and look out through the blinds, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed where I was, watching the dim light of his car in the parking lot. I decided I'd had enough of it. I wasn't the type to overthink things, but something felt wrong. So, I walked over to the window, carefully pulled the blinds back just a little, and peeped out. His car was still there. But now he was sitting in the front seat, looking straight ahead, not moving at all. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought he might have just been on a phone call or something. But no. He was just sitting there. I kept watching for another 5 minutes, and nothing changed. It was like he was waiting for something. Or someone. But I didn't know who. I pulled away from the window quickly, feeling suddenly claustrophobic. I sat back down on the couch, heart racing a little. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but all I could think about was the man sitting outside. What was he waiting for? Why hadn't he left? It wasn't like I lived in a busy area. It was a quiet neighborhood, and no one was walking around at this hour. I decided to call the restaurant, just to ask if the delivery driver was supposed to be hanging around for any reason. I didn't want to come off as paranoid, but I had to ask. The restaurant worker who answered said she didn't know anything about him still being there. She said, "He's just the driver, sir." Maybe he was waiting for his next delivery? I wasn't buying it. He'd been there for an hour now. I tried to calm myself, reminding myself it could be innocent. Maybe he just didn't have anywhere to go. But I knew something was off. I kept glancing back at the window every few minutes, each time feeling more uneasy. The car was still there, and now the man wasn't just sitting in the front seat. He had gotten out. Slowly. I saw him through the slats of the blinds. He wasn't moving fast, just kind of lingering around the car, looking in all directions. Now, I was really freaked out. It didn't make sense. It was like he was waiting for the right moment to do something, but I had no idea what. I grabbed my phone again, thinking I might call someone, but then I stopped. I didn't want to seem overdramatic. What if he was just tired or waiting for something? I tried to distract myself, but I couldn't. The longer I watched, the worse it got. After another 30 minutes, the driver finally got back in his car. But instead of driving off, he just sat there again. I felt sick, like I was being watched, but I didn't know how to make him leave. I didn't even know if I should do anything. Was he dangerous? Eventually, after another long stretch of time, he finally drove off. I felt this strange mix of relief and frustration. I couldn't figure out why it had bothered me so much. He didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't know what I was expecting. But something about the way he had sat there, in the dark, staring at nothing, unsettled me in a way I couldn't shake. I didn't order delivery again for a long time. And when I did, I made sure to never be alone when the food came. I couldn't forget how that man lingered outside my window, hours after doing his job, just watching. I wasn't planning to stop at that rest area. I had been driving for hours, and honestly, I was already thinking about pushing through the night to get to my destination. But then I saw the signs for the rest stop and figured it would be a good idea to stretch my legs, maybe grab a snack, and use the bathroom. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and there weren't many cars in the parking lot. Just a few trucks and a couple of cars here and there. Pretty quiet, which is exactly what I wanted. I walked into the building, and the first thing I noticed was how dim the lights were. It felt kind of abandoned, which was odd for a rest stop, but I didn't think too much of it. The restrooms were right off the lobby, and I made my way over to the door. There was no one around, not even at the vending machines. The place felt empty, maybe even a little off, but nothing I couldn't shrug off. I pushed the door open, and it creaked a little. Inside, there were 2 sinks and a line of stalls on the far wall. At first, I didn't pay much attention to them, just took care of business. I figured I'd be in and out pretty quickly. But when I went to walk into a stall, I noticed the locks. Every stall was locked. At least, it looked like they were. Each door had one of those sliding bolts that you can't really mistake for anything else. I tried a couple of them anyway, out of habit. But sure enough, all of them were either completely latched or locked in some way. I stood there for a second, puzzled. I didn't think it was a big deal at first. Maybe someone was cleaning the bathroom, or it was just some weird timing where all the stalls were taken. Still, it seemed strange. Why would every stall be occupied at this hour? I looked around, but there was no one in sight. I was starting to get that uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, like something was off, but I still needed to go. I checked again, just in case I'd missed something. I didn't know what I expected, but there was nothing unusual. Just the locked stalls. The place was empty, save for me. Then I noticed something that really started to make my skin crawl. There was one stall in the corner, way down by the end. The door wasn't locked, but it was slightly ajar. I don't know why I noticed it, but something about that crack in the door made me stop and stare for a second too long. It wasn't wide open, just a small gap. I could barely make out the faintest movement inside. I figured maybe it was just a janitor, or someone who'd been in there too long and hadn't locked it properly. But still, I couldn't shake the odd feeling I had. The rest of the stalls were locked tight, but this one was open just a little. I walked over slowly, almost against my will, and pushed the door open further. And that's when I saw it. There, on the floor, right near the entrance to the stall, was a phone. It was laying face up, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. It was aimed right at me, recording. I froze. My first thought was that someone had forgotten their phone, but then I noticed something else. The phone wasn't just sitting there, it was positioned intentionally, aimed right at the entrance of the stall, like it had been placed there to catch whoever walked in. I couldn't explain why, but a wave of panic washed over me. The phone wasn't just recording, it felt deliberate, like someone wanted me to notice it. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, wondering if someone was watching me, waiting for me to react. I wasn't sure what to do. I thought about just walking away, leaving the bathroom and pretending I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. I didn't want to turn my back on it. Something about the whole thing felt wrong, too wrong to ignore. I stepped closer, hesitating, my feet feeling heavier with every step. I leaned down slightly, just enough to get a better look at the phone. There was a faint light coming from the screen, but I couldn't make out any details, just a blur of color, like the camera was shaking. I felt like I was being watched. There was a low buzzing sound, like the phone was still recording. It was the strangest thing. It was like the phone was waiting for me to make the next move, like it was part of some twisted game. I had to get out of there. I wasn't sure what I thought would happen if I stayed, but I didn't want to find out. I turned around quickly, ready to bolt, but before I could reach the door, I heard something behind me. It was a faint rustling sound, like paper shifting or clothes moving. I turned my head instinctively, expecting to see someone standing there, but the stall was empty. The door was wide open now, no one inside. I didn't stick around to figure out what had happened. I practically ran out of the bathroom, nearly knocking over the door as I left. My hands were shaking by the time I got to the lobby, but I didn't look back. I didn't want to look back. I just needed to get in my car and leave. I'm not even sure why I felt so scared. It wasn't just the phone, it was the whole situation. Why was it there? Why had the stall been left open? Why were the others locked? It was like someone had been waiting for me to walk in, to see that phone, and to feel that exact sense of dread that I was feeling. When I got to my car, I checked the rearview mirror before pulling out of the parking spot, but there was no one around. The parking lot was still mostly empty. I drove off, not daring to look in the rearview again. I don't know what that was all about. I don't know if it was a prank or something worse. But I haven't stopped at a rest area since. I got to the motel late, way later than I meant to. I had been on the road most of the day, and by the time I pulled into the lot, it was almost midnight. It wasn't anything fancy, one of those places with the doors that open right onto the parking lot, all in a row under a flickering neon sign. The kind of place you pick when you're too tired to be picky. I parked right in front of my room. Number 112. The lot was almost empty, just a few other cars scattered around. I grabbed my bag from the back seat and headed for the door. The air was sticky and smelled like old rain and hot asphalt. I noticed then that across from my room, right across, the door to 109 was cracked open a little. I didn't think much of it. People smoke outside their rooms all the time, leave the door propped open to air it out. Still, something about how dark it was inside 109 made me glance twice. No lights on, no sound. Just a sliver of blackness between the door and the frame. I looked away, unlocked my door, and went inside. The room smelled like stale carpet and cleaning spray. The kind that tries and fails to cover something worse. The light above the bed flickered when I turned it on, buzzing loud enough that I turned it back off after a second. I was too tired to care. I locked the door, threw the security chain on, and dropped my stuff onto the little table next to the window. I pulled the curtain shut. They were the cheap kind that don't quite meet in the middle, always leaving a gap. I tugged at them until it was as closed as it would get, then sat on the bed scrolling through my phone. That's when I noticed it. The little gap in the curtain was pointed right at 109. And even from where I was sitting, even in the bad light, I could see the door was still cracked open. And someone was standing there. At first, it didn't register. It just looked like a dark shape, a little deeper than the shadows around it. But the longer I stared, the more I could make out. A shoulder, part of a head. Not moving. Just standing there, behind the door, peeking out. I told myself it was none of my business. Maybe it was another tired traveler just getting some air. Maybe it was nothing. I turned off my phone and lay back on the bed, staring up at the water-stained ceiling. But I kept thinking about it. After a few minutes, I couldn't help it. I got up and peered through the edge of the curtain again. The door across the way was still cracked. The figure was still there, watching my room. I stepped back fast, heart thudding. I locked the window, checked the door again. The chain was on, the deadbolt was turned. I even shoved a chair under the doorknob like I'd seen in movies. I felt stupid doing it, but it made me feel a little better. I told myself to just ignore it. Sleep it off. I'd be gone first thing in the morning. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every little sound made my skin crawl. Cars going by on the highway in the distance. The ice machine outside rattling once. Something that sounded like a footstep on the walkway. I looked at the clock. 1:37 a.m. I told myself to stop being dramatic. I got up to use the bathroom, flipped on the light. When I came out, I glanced at the window out of habit. The door to 109 was wide open now. Wide open. And nobody was standing there. I backed up slowly, my mouth dry. I didn't want to move too fast, didn't want to make a sound. I turned off the light in the bathroom so it would be harder to see inside my room from the outside. I stood there in the dark, barely breathing. Then I heard it. A soft scrape, like a shoe dragging across concrete. Right outside my door. I didn't know what to do. My car was right there, just a few feet away, but to get to it, I have to open the door. Whoever was out there would see me immediately. I thought about calling the front desk, but when I checked the little notepad by the phone, there was no number listed. Just some ad for a pizza place. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, hand shaking, and pulled up the keypad to call 911. My thumb hovered over the call button. And then I heard a knock. Not loud. Soft. Almost polite. I froze. Another knock. A little louder this time. I crept to the peephole, even though every part of me was screaming not to. I looked out. Nobody there. But something was wrong. The way the light from the parking lot spilled across the walkway, it was broken, like someone was crouching just out of view. I backed away from the door so fast I tripped over my bag and hit the floor. The thud wasn't loud, but it was enough. I heard a low voice from outside. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone muttering. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys off the table, slung my bag over my shoulder, and moved to the window. I yanked the curtain back just enough to see. My car was there. The lot was empty otherwise. Whoever was outside wasn't looking at the window. I couldn't see them at all now. I had two options: sit in the room all night waiting for whatever was going to happen, or make a run for it. I took a deep breath, pulled the chair away from the door as quietly as I could, undid the chain, and unlocked it. I counted to 3 in my head, then threw the door open and sprinted. I didn't look to either side. I didn't even breathe. I just ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, dropping them once before getting the door open. I jumped in, slammed the lock down, and started the engine. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. A man in a dark hoodie and jeans, standing just a few feet away where the walkway met the lot. He had been crouched down, waiting. He didn't say anything. Didn't chase me. Just stood there, staring, as I backed out and tore out of the parking lot without even checking for traffic. I drove about 15 miles before I stopped at a gas station, parked under the bright lights, and sat there for a long time with the doors locked. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about how long he must have stood there, crouching, waiting for me to open the door. I don't know what would have happened if I had. I don't want to know. I pulled into the motel a little after midnight. It was one of those cheap ones right off the highway, with a half-dead neon sign and parking spots right in front of the rooms. I was too tired to care. I just wanted a shower and a few hours of sleep before getting back on the road. I parked in front of room 212. There weren't many cars in the lot, maybe 3 or 4. As I got out, I noticed the door to the room across from mine, 209, was open just a crack. No lights inside, just darkness. I figured maybe someone was stepping out for a smoke or getting ice. I didn't see anyone, so I didn't think much about it. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked to my door. While I fumbled with the key card, I got that weird feeling like someone was watching me. I glanced over my shoulder at 209, but there was still no movement. Just that dark little gap in the doorway. I hurried inside, locked the door, bolted it, and slid the chain across. The room smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. I tossed my bag onto the chair by the window and yanked the curtain shut. They didn't close all the way. A little sliver of the parking lot was still visible, but I was too exhausted to mess with it. I kicked off my shoes and flopped onto the bed. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to unwind, when something caught my eye through the gap in the curtains. It was quick, just a flicker of movement. I sat up and leaned closer. Across the lot, the door to 209 was still cracked, and for a second, I thought I saw a face there. Low, like someone crouching. I stared for a while, but nothing else moved. Maybe I imagined it. I set my phone on the nightstand and tried to sleep. I was almost dozing off when I heard a soft creak from outside, like the sound of a shoe scuffing concrete. I held my breath and listened. Another scrape, closer to my door this time. I got up as quietly as I could and looked through the peephole. No one there. I was about to back away when I realized something. The angle of the outside light was off. There was a dark shape just below the peephole, like someone crouched out of sight. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I stood there in the middle of the room, not sure what to do. Calling the front desk crossed my mind, but there was no phone in the room, just an old, broken base where one should have been. I grabbed my car keys off the table and stood there, clutching them like that would somehow protect me. Then came the knock. It was soft. Way too soft. 3 taps, like the person barely touched the door. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Another knock. A little louder this time. I backed into the bathroom and closed the door halfway. I didn't want to be near the window. I didn't want to be anywhere near the door. I listened, trying to hear if they were still there. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. Just a little, like someone testing it. I gripped the edge of the sink to steady myself. My brain was screaming to get out, but I didn't want to open the door. I kept thinking about that dark gap across the lot, the way it felt like someone had been watching me the whole time. Finally, I decided I had to move. I inched back into the main room, staying low, and pulled the curtains aside just enough to peek out. My car was right there. The lot was empty except for the same few cars. No one was in sight. I stared at the door. The chain was still on. The deadbolt too. I could make it if I moved fast enough. I slipped my shoes back on, grabbed my bag, and took a deep breath. In one motion, I undid the chain, turned the lock, and yanked the door open. The lot looked huge and empty in the dim light. I didn't see anyone. I sprinted to my car, keys in hand, heart beating so hard it hurt. I had just thrown the door open when I heard the footsteps fast, running toward me. I didn't look. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and hit the lock. As I started the car, I caught a glimpse in my side mirror. A man in a dark hoodie stood a few feet from my car, just standing there, breathing heavy like he'd been running. His hands were empty, but something about the way he stared made my stomach twist. I threw the car in reverse and backed out so fast I almost hit the curb. I sped out of the lot, tires screeching. I didn't stop driving until I was 20 miles down the highway, at a busy truck stop with a diner and bright lights everywhere. I parked under a streetlight, locked my doors, and sat there until the sun came up. I never went back for the refund. I didn't even call to complain. I just kept driving. I'm not sure where to start with this. I've been going back and forth in my mind for weeks now, trying to figure out if I'm just imagining things, if I'm going crazy, or if something else is going on. I never really believed in strange occurrences or anything paranormal, but this has me questioning everything. It started about 2 months ago. I was at home, sitting on the couch, watching TV after a long day at work. The windows were open because it was a warm evening, and I kept hearing the sounds of traffic and people walking by. Everything seemed normal. But then, as I was flipping through the channels, I caught a faint smell. It was like flowers, but not the kind you get from a garden. It was something more specific, sweet, but not overly sweet. Almost musky. I know it sounds weird, but it smelled familiar. It wasn't a flower I recognized, but it felt like something I should know. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. I thought it might be my neighbor's perfume, but that didn't quite make sense either. It was just there, lingering in the air. It wasn't overpowering, but it wasn't something I could ignore either. The kind of smell that catches your attention even when you're not really thinking about it. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe it was something outside. A passing flower shop or some kind of scent from a nearby store. But the next day, I noticed it again. This time, when I was leaving the house. I stepped outside to check the mail, and there it was again, like someone had sprayed it in the air around me. I looked around, but I couldn't find the source. I checked the flowers in my yard, but they didn't smell like that. My neighbor's yard didn't either. It was as if the scent had appeared out of nowhere, lingering in the air around me. At first, I thought it might be some kind of coincidence. Maybe it was in the air or carried by the wind. But as the days went by, the scent kept following me. I'd be at work, sitting at my desk, and I'd catch a whiff of it, sometimes faint, sometimes stronger. It wasn't like a perfume scent either, not the kind you wear daily. It was somehow more delicate. It reminded me of something I'd smelled a long time ago, but I couldn't figure out what. Maybe it was a flower I'd smelled as a child, or maybe an old perfume my mom used to wear. But there was nothing concrete, nothing I could link it to directly. The weirdest part was that the scent seemed to follow me. No matter where I went, it was there, like a shadow. I'd catch it when I walked into the grocery store, or when I was sitting in my car. It would pop up in the weirdest places, like it was always waiting for me. I even started noticing it in the middle of the night, when I would wake up to use the bathroom. I'd be half asleep, and then, there it was again, faint, like it had seeped into the room while I wasn't paying attention. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was just a trick of the mind, I thought. Some kind of subconscious association with a memory I couldn't remember. But then it started getting to me. I could feel my mind constantly reaching for an answer, trying to grasp at something, but it always slipped away when I tried to figure out where I had smelled it before. And the more it happened, the more I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. One night, I decided to go for a walk. I had to clear my head, and I thought maybe getting some fresh air would help. I was walking through the neighborhood, not paying much attention to anything around me, when suddenly, I caught the scent again. It was strong, almost suffocating, like it had surrounded me. I stopped in my tracks and took a deep breath, trying to place it. It wasn't just that it smelled familiar, it was comforting. Like I knew it intimately, but I couldn't remember why. The strangest thing was, it felt like it was connected to something in my past, but I couldn't put my finger on what. It was so vivid, so real, yet so completely out of place. I thought back to my childhood, but nothing stood out. My mom didn't wear perfume like that. My friends didn't wear anything like it. I'd never encountered a flower with that exact smell. And yet, there it was. It felt like the answer was just out of reach, no matter how hard I tried to grab onto it. The next day, it happened again. I was sitting in my car, waiting for a friend to arrive at the restaurant we were meeting at. I was parked on the side of the building, and the windows were down because it was warm. The smell hit me again, stronger this time. I looked around, but there was no one near my car, no flowers, no perfume shops. I rolled up the windows, thinking it was something in the air. But when my friend arrived, the scent was still there. I don't know if she noticed it or if she thought I was crazy, but it was there, hovering, like it was following me. After a couple more days of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find out where the smell was coming from. I started retracing my steps, going over every place I'd been. I even asked people around me if they could smell it, but no one seemed to notice it except me. I checked the air vents in my apartment, my car, the places I visited regularly, but nothing explained it. No source, no reason. Just the scent. Then, one evening, something happened that made everything worse. I was cleaning out my closet, just sorting through old clothes, when I found an old box tucked away in the back. It had been there for years, forgotten, I guess. I opened it up, and inside was an old scarf I hadn't seen in forever. It was a gift from my grandmother, and I hadn't worn it in years. As soon as I unwrapped it, the scent hit me full force, stronger than ever. It was the exact same smell, the one that had been following me around for weeks. I held the scarf up to my face, inhaling deeply. It was the exact same scent. I'd never noticed it before when I had the scarf, but now, with everything that had been happening, it felt like the answer to all my questions. How had I never recognized this before? I sat there in my closet for a long time, trying to figure out why that scarf smelled like the very thing I'd been searching for. How had it stayed in that box, undisturbed for years, without me ever noticing the scent? Was it possible that it had been in the air all along, without me realizing it? Or had the smell somehow gotten stronger over time? I don't know, but it was the only thing that made sense. Ever since that day, the scent has been gone. It's like it vanished as mysteriously as it came. I've looked for it, tried to find it again, but it hasn't come back. I had stayed late again. It wasn't the first time, and I didn't think much of it. My supervisor didn't ask me to stay. I just had too many things to finish. There was a meeting the next morning, and I wanted to be ahead. Everyone else had left by 6, and I stayed behind at my desk, working with my headphones on. I didn't look at the time for a while. The floor was quiet, no voices, no phones ringing. Just the soft hum from the vending machine in the break room and the air system clicking on and off. I didn't realize how late it had gotten until my laptop screen dimmed and I saw the clock in the corner. It was 9:42. I stood up to stretch and noticed how stiff my back was. The lights were still on in the main hallway, but the offices around mine were dark. I packed up my things, shut my laptop, and tossed my empty coffee cup in the bin. I didn't feel nervous or anything, just tired. When I got to the main lobby, I pulled on the glass door like I always did, but it didn't move. I pulled harder. It rattled a little, but didn't open. I looked around. Everything looked normal, except the front lights were dimmed, and the desk where security usually sat was empty. I thought maybe the door just needed to be pushed, so I tried again, but nothing happened. It was locked. I didn't panic. I figured maybe the automatic lock system kicked in early or someone accidentally activated it. I walked back toward the elevator and pressed the button to go down to the basement level. There's an emergency stair exit there with a push bar that leads out to the street. I'd seen people use it during drills. The elevator opened slow, like it always did, and I rode it down alone. When I got to the basement, the lights were dimmer and buzzed overhead. I walked down the short hall to the emergency door and pushed the bar. It didn't move. I leaned into it, tried again. It felt solid, like something was holding it from the outside. I checked to see if maybe a bolt was engaged or something was jammed. There was nothing. Just the red exit sign glowing above it and a silence that made my ears ring. I pulled out my phone to call building security. No answer. I called the main number on the office directory. Still nothing. I sent a text to my coworker Liz, who I knew had left right before dinner. Hey, did you see anyone lock the front door? No reply. The reception out there is weak, so I went back upstairs to the ground floor where signal was better. I tried again. No reply, no call back. I walked to the side exit by the break room. It was one of those smaller doors with a coded handle for employee use. I typed in the passcode. The light blinked red. I tried again. Same thing. I tried a different exit at the end of the hall, the one we use sometimes when the cleaners are in the main area. Same result. Locked. Nothing opened. I felt cold then, even though the building was warm. I went back to the lobby and stood by the glass door. Outside, I could see the sidewalk. A few cars passed, and headlights shone through. Everything looked normal out there. But no one could see me, or if they did, they didn't look. I banged on the door. Nothing. I walked the floor again, thinking maybe someone else had stayed late. Maybe maintenance or a janitor or someone had come in and locked up without checking. Every room was dark and empty. The lights above flickered once or twice. I kept walking in circles, trying door after door. Even the rooftop access was locked. It was like the place was sealed from the outside. I went back to my desk and sat down. My phone still had signal, but it was past 10 now and I didn't want to call the police unless I had to. I told myself it was a mistake. Something with the system. Someone forgot I was still inside and set the alarm and locked it down. But the silence started to bother me more. I kept hearing things. Not voices, but soft sounds like papers moving, or a click like a switch turning on. At one point I thought I heard a door open somewhere far off, but when I checked, everything was the same. At 10:48, the lights in the break room went off. They're on a timer sometimes, but only if no one moves in there for long. I hadn't been in there in hours. I got up to turn them back on, and the moment I walked in, they flicked back to life like nothing was wrong. I looked out the window. It had started to rain, the kind that makes everything look hazy. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. I watched the street and saw someone walking with an umbrella, but they didn't stop. I didn't try banging again. I texted Liz again. Nothing. Then I called her. This time it rang 3 times, then cut off. No voicemail, no tone. Just dead air. I started walking the halls again, more out of needing to do something than anything else. I checked every door I had already checked. Some of them didn't even have handles, just metal panels. I knocked on a few, half expecting someone to answer, but I knew no one would. I tried to get into the server room, thinking maybe the system had gone down and I could reset something, but my T-card didn't work. It always worked before. At 11:26, the lights in the hallway dimmed slightly. Not off, just lower, like they were being powered down slowly. I went back to my desk and opened my laptop. The company server was still online. I could see the shared folders, but nothing had updated since 6:12 p.m. I opened a browser to send an email to myself, just to test it. When I hit send, it froze for a few seconds, then crashed. I sat there, staring at the screen. At 11:43, I heard what sounded like a footstep behind me. I turned around fast, but there was no one there. Just my chair and the quiet humming of electronics. The printer made a noise, but it was just the fan turning on. I stood up and walked around the cubicles. I didn't see anything. I went back to the emergency stair door and shoved it hard. Still locked. I pounded on it with both fists. Nothing moved. By midnight, I felt like I had walked the entire floor 20 times. I stopped at the lobby again. The street outside was empty now. No more cars. No people. Even the rain had stopped. I stood there with my hand on the glass. I didn't know what to do anymore. I tried calling my own home line, just to hear a different sound. It rang once, then cut off. I tried again. Same thing. At 12:17, the lights above the front desk started flickering. Just those ones. Then they stopped. That's when I finally sat down on the floor. I don't know how long I stayed there. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just stared at the glass, waiting for morning. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I had been with my friends since the afternoon, moving between stages, dancing, drinking water, standing in the shade when it got too hot. The festival was big. Bigger than I expected. There were lights everywhere, people in glitter, people sitting in circles on the grass, and the sound from the music never stopped. Everything mixed together. Somewhere near the north stage I lost them. I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, I couldn't find them. I waited in the spot we had all agreed on earlier if something happened, but after 15 minutes, no one showed up. I texted, called, but nothing went through. I figured the signal was bad. It was already late anyway, and I was starting to feel tired and heavy. I started walking toward the front gates. It took a while because the crowds were thick. I thought if I just got outside the main area, maybe the signal would come back. When I got past the last checkpoint and into the wider open field that led to the parking lots and shuttles, there weren't as many people. I saw a few sitting in the grass. Some were talking, others were lying down. A couple of volunteers stood near the exits wearing the yellow festival shirts. I kept walking, trying to spot someone from our group or at least a working phone booth or charger. Then I noticed one of the smaller gates off to the left. It was usually closed, but it was open, and a white van with the festival logo was parked beside it. A man leaned against the side, smoking. He looked over and asked if I was all right. I said I had gotten separated from my friends and needed to get to the shuttle stop. He nodded and said the main shuttle stop was overcrowded, and they were doing small rides down to the main road, where phone signals were working better. He had the staff shirt on. Same color, same print. He didn't seem nervous or strange. I asked if I could join, and he said yes. He opened the passenger door and waved me in. I didn't feel afraid, not really. I was tired, my feet hurt, and my head was starting to buzz. The inside of the van smelled like plastic and dust. The air conditioning was strong. He didn't talk much. Just said he had done a double shift and was ready to be done for the night. I nodded and leaned back. The lights of the festival started to fade behind us. The van made turns through the access roads behind the main site, past trailers and supply tents. I recognized the area at first, but after a few minutes, I didn't know where we were anymore. The road got bumpier. Trees on both sides started closing in. There weren't any lights anymore. No signs. Just darkness and the light of the headlights. I sat up straighter. I asked how far it was to the main road. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Not far. This is the service path." The trees got thicker. There were no sounds now except the tires on gravel. I looked behind us. I couldn't see the festival lights anymore. I looked at my phone. Still no signal. We passed what looked like a burned-out trailer or shed on the right. I noticed it because of the way it looked half collapsed and the door was hanging off. I don't think I should have seen something like that so close to the festival. I asked again where we were going. He didn't look at me, just kept driving. Then I saw something on the dashboard. A badge. It didn't say the name of the festival. It was just plain plastic, like something from an old job or store. It didn't match his shirt either, now that I looked closer. The shirt looked faded. Too faded. The logo was smudged. I asked again if he was with the staff. He said yes, but this time his voice sounded too flat. Like he had practiced the answer. The trees started thinning. The van slowed down. There was a small clearing ahead. No buildings. just dirt and bushes and a broken fence on one side. He stopped the van. I didn't move. I just looked at him. He didn't open his door. He just sat there and stared ahead. I waited, thinking maybe he was checking directions or waiting for someone. But he didn't take out a phone or GPS. He didn't do anything. I asked him why we stopped. He said, "This is as far as it goes." That's when I noticed the keys were still in the ignition, but his hand wasn't on them. His hands were on his knees. I asked again where the shuttle was. He didn't answer. I opened the door. I didn't even wait. I just stepped out and shut it behind me. I stood outside the van, not sure what to do. There was no sound, no lights, no one around. He didn't move. He stayed in the van. I walked around it slowly, keeping my distance. I started walking back the way we came, but I didn't know which way that was anymore. Everything looked the same. Then I heard the van door open behind me. I didn't turn around. I just started walking faster. The gravel made crunching sounds under my shoes. I heard his steps too, slower than mine but getting closer. I broke into a run. I didn't know where I was going. I just moved. The trees blurred past. Branches hit my arms. I didn't stop. I heard the van engine start behind me. Then headlights. I turned and saw the lights cutting through the trees, moving in the same direction I was going. I ran off the path and ducked low into the bushes. I waited. The van rolled past slowly, lights scanning the sides. I stayed down until it was gone. I didn't hear it turn around. I didn't hear it stop. Just silence. I waited longer. Then I got up and started walking the opposite way. I didn't run anymore. I just moved as quietly as I could. My heart wouldn't slow down. Eventually, I saw a light ahead. Not from a van. A small booth with a generator and 2 people sitting inside, eating something. Security guards. I ran up and told them everything. One of them stood up, looked into the trees, then walked over to a radio and started speaking into it. The other sat me down, gave me water, and asked what the van looked like. I told them everything I could. They called someone else, then walked with me back toward the edge of the festival where the real shuttles were. I saw some of the lights again. People. Sound. I never saw the man again. They said the van didn't belong to any of the contractors. None of the plates matched. No one else had reported seeing it. They let me charge my phone and I finally got in touch with my friends. I didn't tell them much. I just said I got lost. That was 3 months ago. I still check my phone every day, expecting some weird message or call. Nothing yet. I try not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out of the van when I did. But sometimes I dream about the road. The trees on both sides. The burned trailer. The badge on the dashboard that didn't match anything. And the way he just stared straight ahead, like he wasn't really waiting for me to ask questions. Just waiting for me to stop. The first thing was the toothbrush. It was just a normal morning. I got up a little later than I wanted because I had hit snooze twice. I went to the bathroom like I always do, turned on the tap, and reached for my toothbrush. It's an electric one, not fancy, just the kind you buy once and replace the head every few months. I pushed the button and nothing happened. No buzz, no little whir like it usually does. I tried again. Still nothing. I thought maybe it had died. It had been a while since I changed the battery. I opened the back to check. It was empty. I don't mean it was loose or out of place, it was just gone. The battery compartment was clean, no corrosion, nothing. just no battery inside. I stood there for a minute, confused, thinking maybe I had taken it out myself and forgot. That didn't seem like something I'd do, but I still checked the little drawer where I keep all the extra stuff: floss, cotton balls, backup batteries, little travel bottles. The backup AA was missing too. I always kept one spare, just one, and it was not there. I looked again, moved things around, even took the whole drawer out. Nothing. I ended up brushing with a manual brush that came in a hotel kit I never used. Then I left for work. All day it sat in my head. The missing battery. It felt stupid to think so much about it, but something didn't sit right. I kept replaying it, the way the compartment was just clean and empty, like someone had opened it carefully and taken it out. Why would I do that? That night, I checked again. Still no battery in the brush, no battery in the drawer. I started looking around the apartment. I live alone. It's a small place, just a one-bedroom on the second floor. I checked the junk drawer in the kitchen. I checked under the sink. Even in the bedroom, just in case I had brought it in there for some reason. I didn't find anything. I let it go after that, told myself I'd buy more batteries the next day. That next evening, I got home late. I was tired. I had bought the batteries like I said I would, but before I changed it, I dropped my earrings somewhere in the bedroom. I got on my knees to look under the bed. That's when I saw them. 2 AA batteries. Rolled slightly under the middle of the frame, right beside a balled-up tissue. I pulled them out. The batteries were the same brand I always buy. They didn't look corroded or used up. One had a little smudge of something on it, like dust or oil from fingers. The tissue wasn't mine. That I knew for sure. I hadn't been sick, I hadn't cried, I hadn't used tissues at all in a while. I buy a different brand, mine are plain. This one had a tiny pattern on the edge. I touched it once, just lightly. It was stiff. Tried. I don't know why, but I didn't want to open it to see more. I got up and stood still. I didn't even put the batteries back in the toothbrush. I just stood in the bedroom with them in my hand. I looked around like something might jump out, but it was quiet. I checked the front door. Still locked. I checked the windows. Nothing open. Nothing forced. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept waking up, thinking I heard something. Once I sat up and just listened. I thought I heard the fridge open, but it was just the compressor turning on. Then I thought I heard a step. Just one. The next day I stayed home. I didn't tell work why. I said I wasn't feeling good. That was true. My stomach kept turning. I decided to check everything. Drawers, closets, cabinets. I don't have a lot of stuff, so it didn't take long. Nothing else was missing. Nothing else added either. Then I remembered my webcam. It's built into the laptop. I hardly use it, but I remembered someone once saying you could check the log to see when it turned on. I don't know much about computers, but I found the activity history. Most of it looked normal. Updates. App starts. Then I saw one line that stood out. Camera active, 3:42 a.m. That was 3 nights before. I hadn't opened anything that used the camera. That night I stayed up. I sat in the chair in the living room, facing the hallway. I kept every light off except one little lamp. I held my phone in my hand. I don't know what I thought would happen, but I wanted to be ready if it did. Nothing came. Nothing moved. Around 4, I gave up. I went to bed, left the hallway light on this time. The next morning, I checked the toothbrush again. It still had no battery. I had never put them back in. But the drawer, the one with all the little things, it was open just a crack. I didn't open it. I stood there again, staring, like that would explain anything. That evening, I put tape over the battery slot on the toothbrush. I wrote the date on it in pen. Then I put it back in the cup. A few days passed. Nothing else strange. I almost convinced myself I imagined all of it. Then on a Thursday, I got home from work and saw something under the bathroom sink. It was my old razor. One I had thrown away weeks ago because the blade was dull and the handle cracked. But it was back, sitting on top of a washcloth I hadn't used in months. That same tissue was beside it. The patterned one. I moved out the next week. I didn't break the lease. I just packed up and left. Found someone on a message board to take it over. I didn't take the toothbrush. I left the tape on it. I didn't take the razor, or the tissue, or the batteries. I took my clothes, my dishes, my books. Nothing small. Nothing I couldn't track. The new place has 2 locks on the door and no vents big enough to crawl through. But sometimes I still check under the bed. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 6th floor. It's not a big place. Just one hallway, a small kitchen, and a balcony off the living room. My dog sleeps in the bedroom with me most nights. His name's Cody. He's not big, but he's alert. Part shepherd, part something else. Not a barker, not unless there's a reason. That night I went to bed around midnight. I had the windows closed because it had been cold lately. The balcony door too, which I always locked. It's one of those sliding doors with a vertical lock handle. Once it clicks in, it can't be opened from the outside. I double check it every night before bed. Habit. I woke up sometime after 2. I didn't check the clock right away because what woke me wasn't a noise. It was Cody. He was standing at the foot of the bed, not moving, just staring toward the bedroom door. He let out this low sound, not full-on growling, more like a warning. I could hear the hair shift on his back when he tensed up. I sat up slow. It was dark, but there was some light coming in from the street. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened. I thought maybe someone was in the hallway outside the apartment. Sometimes you hear people walk by, but this didn't feel like that. Cody crawled again, a little louder, and took 2 steps forward. He was focused on the living room. I got up. I didn't turn on the light. I don't know why, I just didn't. I walked out of the bedroom and looked toward the balcony. That's when I saw it. There was a shape, not clear, just a faint dark spot that moved away from the glass as I looked. It was like someone had been standing right there and stepped back fast, out of sight. But there's nothing out there. Just the balcony. No stairs, no fire escape. Just a railing and a drop down to the alley 6 floors below. I walked slowly toward the door. Cody stayed close behind me. His ears were up, and he let out another deep growl. I stopped about 5 feet from the glass. The curtain was half open, just like I'd left it. The lock was still clicked down. I checked it. Still locked tight. I even jiggled the door a bit. It didn't move. I looked out. There was nothing on the balcony. Just my old chair, a flower pot I never used, and some dead leaves that blew in weeks ago. No footprints. No handprints on the glass. No sign of anyone. I stood there a while. I felt strange, like I had walked into the wrong room in someone else's house. Cody stayed by the couch, still staring at the door. I finally turned on the light. The room looked normal. Quiet. Nothing moved. I opened the balcony door and stepped out. The air was cold. I looked over the edge, both sides. No one on the fire stairs across the alley. No movement anywhere. I went back in and closed the door. I locked it again and checked every other window, every corner of the place. Everything was as it should be. Front door was locked with both bolts. Nothing was open. Nothing was missing. Nothing had changed. But I know what I saw. That shape, that shift in the light, it moved like a person stepping away fast. And I know how it felt. Like I had walked in on something, like someone had just been there and didn't expect to be seen. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed up, lights on. Cody laid on the floor by the balcony, his head between his paws but eyes open. The next morning, I called the front desk. Asked if there were any reports of break-ins or people climbing balconies. They said no. I asked if anyone had been on the roof. They said the access door was locked and alarmed. No one had gone up there. I went down and walked around the building. The way my unit is set up, the balcony isn't easy to reach. Even from above, you'd have to hang and drop. There's no ledge wide enough to walk along. Nothing to hold on to. That night, I put a chair against the balcony door. Not for security, I just wanted to hear it fall if the door opened. I sat on the couch and left the light off again, just to see. Cody sat beside me. We waited. Nothing happened. This kept on for 3 more nights. No more shadows. No sounds. But Cody kept acting strange near the balcony. He'd sit there for long stretches, nose in the air like he was trying to catch a scent. On the 4th day, I found something outside. It was early morning. I opened the balcony to let some air in. I was about to bring my coffee out when I noticed the chair had moved. Not by much, just turned a little to the left. I always keep it facing forward. Always. I stepped closer. That's when I saw it. A handprint. Faint, but there, on the glass, not mine. Too small, and not in the spot I ever touch. It was lower, like someone crouched and leaned in. I took a photo with my phone. Then I wiped it clean. I bought a small camera the next day, one of those motion ones. I set it up pointing at the balcony. It had a card in it to save clips. The camera ran for a week. On the 6th night, there was a clip. I found it the next morning. At 3:11 a.m., the motion sensor kicked on. The image was grainy, but I saw movement. There was something on the balcony. Not a face, not clearly. Just the outline of a person. They didn't climb up. They were already there, like they had just appeared. They stood still for 12 seconds. Then they backed out of the frame. The door never opened. I called the police. They came, looked around, took the footage. They checked the balcony. No signs of entry. No prints. Nothing. They asked if I had enemies, someone who might be watching me. I said no. They said to call if anything else happened. I didn't feel safe after that. I kept the lights on every night. Slept on the couch with Cody nearby. No more camera clips. No more handprints. But one night, about 2 weeks later, I heard something again. It was a sound like fabric rubbing. I got up, went to the balcony. Nothing there. But when I turned to go back, I noticed something small on the floor. A button. Just one, round and dark. Not mine. I checked all my clothes. None missing a button. I still have it. It's in a drawer, next to the batteries and the flashlight. I moved out 2 months later. I don't have a balcony anymore. Just a window that doesn't open all the way. Cody still crawls at night sometimes, at nothing. It was late spring, and the weather had been a mix of sunny and rainy all week. Perfect for a hike, really. I'd been working as a park ranger for almost a year at the time, so I was used to the quiet stretches of woods, the thick canopy, and the occasional distant shout from a hiker or camper. Mostly, it was peaceful. But not this time. It started with the reports. It wasn't anything too strange at first. A couple of hikers said they heard something coming from the culvert that runs under the service road. They described it as screaming, but I didn't think much of it. The place had a creepy vibe, sure. It was remote, the road wasn't well maintained, and the pipe was long, dark, and narrow, probably home to all sorts of small critters. I didn't think it'd be worth investigating at first. People hear weird things in the woods, you know? The next day, another pair of hikers called it in. They said they were sure they heard someone screaming from under the road again, and it was the kind of scream you don't forget. But it wasn't the same scream they'd heard the day before. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were just exaggerating, maybe even trying to stir up some drama for their Instagram or whatever. But after the second report, I decided to take a look. It wasn't like I had anything pressing to do. I grabbed my flashlight and a couple of basic tools just in case, and made my way to the service road. It wasn't the most scenic part of the park, mostly just a long, winding stretch of dirt road that barely anyone ever used. The culvert was right next to a big metal pipe, about 8 feet across, with a rusted grate on either end. I knew it was an old drainage system, one that had probably been there since the 50s. When I got there, it was quiet. Too quiet. The birds weren't chirping, no wind, nothing. I had this weird, crawling feeling in the back of my neck, but I tried to shake it off. I checked the area around the culvert first. No obvious signs of anything being out of place. There were some animal tracks, but they were nothing unusual for this time of year. A few deer, a fox maybe. No sign of human activity. Then, I crouched down to check the grate. It wasn't locked or anything, just old and kind of bent from years of disrepair. I moved it aside and pointed my flashlight down into the pipe. It was pitch black, the kind of darkness that felt like it was swallowing the light whole. I peered inside, but all I could see were the shadows of the twisted metal walls. That's when I noticed it. A sound. Soft, but distinct. A scratching noise, like something or someone was dragging along the metal. I froze, listening, trying to make sense of it. It didn't make sense. The pipe was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, and no animal would make that kind of sound. The scraping continued for a few seconds, then stopped. I called out. Hello? Anyone down there? Nothing. I started to feel stupid. I mean, it was probably just an animal, right? I turned to leave, but then I heard it again, a thud this time, louder than the scratching. I immediately felt my stomach drop. Something about it sounded human. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I pulled my flashlight back out and shone it further down the pipe. That's when I saw something that made my heart race. There were marks. Scratches, deep gouges, like someone had been trying to claw their way out of the pipe. The metal was bent in places, like someone had been kicking at it. At that point, I should have called for backup, but I didn't. I was just trying to make sense of it all, to not freak out. I crouched lower and moved closer to the pipe, feeling an irrational need to know what was going on. That's when I saw something else. A phone. It was lying just inside the pipe, right near the opening, half buried in the dirt and debris. The screen was cracked, but I could still see it was playing a video. I don't know why I looked at it. Maybe I thought I'd find a clue. Maybe I was just curious. I pressed play. The video was grainy, shaky, and the audio was muffled. At first, it just showed darkness, but then there was movement. A hand reaching into the frame, dragging someone into the pipe. A body, limp and dangling. The person's face was hidden, but they were clearly struggling, kicking their legs. Their hands were outstretched as if they were trying to grab something, anything, to stop being pulled. I couldn't breathe for a second. My hands were shaking, and I had to force myself to look away from the screen. But when I did, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The scratching noise started up again. But this time, it wasn't just from inside the pipe. It was coming from somewhere else, behind me, off in the woods, just out of sight. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to run, but I couldn't move. I was stuck, frozen in place. I listened closely, my ears straining for any sound. That's when I heard a voice. Low, soft, almost a whisper. It was coming from somewhere nearby. Help. It was muffled, like it was coming from inside the pipe again. But no one could be down there. Right? I stood up, my legs weak beneath me. The phone was still playing, but I couldn't bring myself to watch the rest. My hand trembled as I shoved it into my pocket, trying to make sense of everything. My mind was racing. I needed to get out of there. I needed to find help. I turned, ready to go, but before I could take a step, I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking towards me through the woods, moving slow and deliberate. The sound was unmistakable, like someone dragging their feet across the dirt. I couldn't see them. I couldn't see anything beyond the trees. But I could hear them coming closer. I don't know how I managed it, but I somehow forced myself to move. I didn't care about being quiet or discreet. I just ran. I didn't even look back. I just ran as fast as I could. My heart was in my throat, and my breath was coming in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop. When I reached the service road, I finally turned to look behind me. There was nothing. The woods were silent again. No one was there. But I didn't stay. I hopped in my truck and drove straight to the ranger station, not slowing down for a second. I told my supervisor everything when I got back, but he didn't seem to take it seriously. I showed him the phone, the video, and the marks on the pipe. He didn't say much, but I could tell he was uneasy. We both knew that there was something wrong out there, but we didn't have the resources to investigate it any further. He said they'd send someone to check it out, but I knew better. I knew I wouldn't go back out there again. Not alone. Not ever. I don't know who was out there, or what happened to the person in the video. But I do know this, I'll never be able to unsee it. And I'll never forget the sound of those footsteps. They were too real. Too close. I've been working as a park ranger for about 3 years, mostly doing patrols and the usual maintenance stuff around the trails. Most days are pretty uneventful, walking the same routes, checking trail signs, making sure no one's doing anything they shouldn't. But a few months ago, something started happening that made me question everything I thought I knew about the job. It started small, like a few hikers getting lost on the same trail. They'd follow the markers, and somehow, they'd end up way off track. Not just a little off track, like they'd end up miles away from where they were supposed to be. Some of them would even end up near dangerous cliffs or bogs where they could have easily gotten hurt. I thought maybe it was just a few confused hikers, but then it kept happening. Over and over. At first, I didn't think much of it. But when it started happening on different trails, I started to get suspicious. I'd go out to check the trail markers myself, and everything looked fine. No broken signs, no obvious signs of vandalism. The markers were in place, just like they should be. But something was off. It was like the people getting lost were following the signs to places they shouldn't be, even when I couldn't see what was wrong with the markers. After a week of this, I got a call from one of the other rangers about a hiker who'd gotten seriously lost. This one was particularly bad. He'd wandered off the trail at night and ended up in a part of the park where he couldn't find his way back. He had to be rescued, and when they got him out, he mentioned something that really set off alarm bells for me. He said he'd seen someone, a figure in the distance, moving around the trail markers. He couldn't tell who it was, but it looked like they were messing with the signs. That's when I decided I had to do something about it. At first, I thought maybe it was just someone messing around. But after hearing about the lost hiker, I realized this was getting serious. So, I started setting up some motion cameras along the more remote trails, places where hikers had gotten lost recently. I wanted to see if I could catch someone in the act of messing with the markers. The first few days were quiet. The cameras didn't pick up anything out of the ordinary. But on the fourth night, something happened. It was late, around 2 a.m., and the motion sensors went off. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. I thought maybe an animal had triggered it. I had to drive out to the site, but when I checked the footage, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a person, a figure, walking down the trail. They were wearing dark clothes and a mask, something like a full-face ski mask, covering all of their features. They moved slow, almost like they were deliberately trying to stay hidden. The person was carrying something, but it was hard to tell what at first. As they got closer to the trail marker, I could see they had a set of tools, pliers, a small hammer, a wrench. They were changing the trail marker. I couldn't believe it. They weren't just moving the marker a little bit. They were taking the whole thing down and replacing it with something else, something that looked like it had been made by hand. The marker they were putting up wasn't official at all. It was something crude, like a hastily carved piece of wood with some kind of symbol on it. I'd never seen anything like it in all my years on the job. The person didn't seem to be in a hurry. They took their time, working like they knew exactly what they were doing. They'd glance around every now and then, like they were making sure no one was watching, but it was like they knew they were alone out there. After a few minutes, they finished, stepped back, and just stared at the marker for a while. Then, they turned and walked off into the woods, disappearing into the dark. I don't know how long I just sat there, staring at the footage. My mind was racing. This was no random prank. Whoever was doing this was intentionally messing with the trail markers, leading people into dangerous parts of the park. I wasn't sure why, but I knew I needed to stop them before someone got hurt. I decided to take a risk. The next night, I set up a second sting. I wasn't just going to catch the person, I was going to confront them. I made sure to set up the cameras in more spots, so I could get a good view of the area where the trail markers were getting swapped out. I grabbed some backup gear, including a walkie-talkie, just in case. I sat in my truck for hours, waiting. I kept going over everything in my head, wondering who could be behind this. Was it someone with a personal vendetta? Someone trying to cause harm for no reason? I had no idea, but I was going to find out. Around 1:30 a.m., the motion sensors on the cameras lit up again. I checked the live feed on my phone. There they were, the same figure from before, walking down the trail, same dark clothes, same mask. This time, I had my heart in my throat. I'd been expecting it, but now that it was happening again, it felt different. More real. I was already in position, hiding just off the trail, maybe 50 yards away. I waited, watching through the trees, as they reached the trail marker. Just like before, they started pulling out their tools. I could hear them working, but I didn't dare move. I kept my eyes on them, waiting for the right moment. Then, something changed. The person stopped what they were doing. I couldn't tell if they had heard something or if they were just taking a break, but they looked around, scanning the trees. For a moment, I thought they might have noticed the cameras, but then they went right back to work, replacing the marker like they hadn't skipped a beat. It was then I realized just how close I was to them, closer than I should have been. My stomach dropped, and I felt my pulse race. I needed to move, but I was frozen, stuck to the spot. I couldn't take my eyes off them. After what felt like forever, the person finished their work and started walking back down the trail, just like the last time. As they passed by me, I held my breath, praying they wouldn't hear me. I could barely see their face through the mask, but there was something unsettling about the way they moved. It was deliberate, like they were doing this for a reason, like they knew exactly what they were doing and why. When they were finally out of sight, I didn't wait. I got up, got in my truck, and followed them. I couldn't just let them walk away, not after what I'd seen. I stayed a few hundred yards behind, keeping my distance, trying to stay out of sight. The person led me deep into the park, further than I'd ever gone on foot. After about 10 minutes, they stopped. They stood there for a moment, looking around, and then they disappeared into the trees. I parked my truck and got out, walking cautiously toward where I last saw them. It was quiet. Too quiet. I kept going, but by the time I got close to where they'd gone, I couldn't find any trace of them. No footprints, no signs of where they'd gone. I searched for hours, but they were gone. I called in the authorities, but by then, there was no sign of the person or the markers they'd been switching. The next day, I took down all the footage and reported it. They couldn't track the person down, though. Whoever it was, they knew the park too well, and they were careful. I still don't know who they were, or why they were doing it. But the park's been quieter since. No more hikers getting lost. And I haven't seen anyone messing with the markers since. It started just past midnight, outside a Love's gas station in Amarillo. I just fueled up and grabbed a couple energy drinks and a sad-looking sandwich from the cooler. Route was pretty straightforward, Amarillo to Albuquerque, hauling frozen goods. Normally, I don't mind the overnight hauls. Roads are quieter, less idiots drifting between lanes on their phones. It's peaceful, usually. I noticed the white sedan when I was pulling out of the lot. Noticed it in that way you notice anything sitting alone under those buzzing floodlights. It was just parked off to the side, not at a pump, engine running, lights off. Tinted windows. It wasn't doing anything, but something about it just stuck with me. I even mumbled, "That's a weird spot to park," to myself before merging back onto I-40. Didn't think too much about it until an hour later. I'd stopped at a little rest pull-off to check a rattling noise that turned out to be a loose bungee on the trailer. I stretched, walked around a bit, had a smoke. Middle of nowhere, total silence except for the low hum of cicadas and the occasional gust of wind brushing past the trees. Then, as I was climbing back up into the cab, headlights turned into the rest area behind me. White sedan. Now, at that point, I didn't recognize it for sure. I told myself there's 1,000 white sedans on the road. But it parked 2 spots over, didn't pull up close to the restrooms or vending machines, didn't shut the engine. Just sat there. I watched in the mirror for a minute. No door opened. No light inside. Just dark, motionless. That's when I got that first twinge. That flicker in your gut that says something's off. Still, I tried to shake it. Told myself I was tired. Told myself I was being paranoid. I started up again and pulled back onto the highway. I was hauling a reefer, so I couldn't really speed too much, especially on those curves near Tucumcari, but I noticed a sedan about 5 minutes later, 2 cars back in the sparse night traffic. That could have been the end of it. I was hoping it would be. Maybe they just happened to stop at the same rest area. Maybe they were just heading the same way. Then I stopped again, this time at a pilot about an hour outside Albuquerque to use the restroom and grab a refill coffee. Parking lot was mostly empty except for a couple other rigs and 1 or 2 sedans, nothing unusual. I went inside, took my time, even browsed a bit, trying to wake myself up. When I came back out, maybe 15 minutes later, the same white sedan was sitting at the edge of the lot, under a dead street lamp. Again, engine running. No one got out. This time I felt it hard. A cold sort of pressure in my chest, like my body was realizing something before my mind could catch up. I stood by my truck for a moment, pretending to check the tires, just watching that sedan out of the corner of my eye. It didn't move. It didn't idle forward or back. It didn't flick its lights. Just sat there. I climbed into the cab and waited. Maybe 5 minutes. 10. The sedan didn't move. Finally, I turned the key and eased out, slow. Merged back onto the highway. Checked my mirrors constantly. It showed up again, like clockwork, 5 minutes later. 2 cars back. I started testing it. I took the next exit, some little no-name place with a boarded-up diner and a gas station that looked abandoned. Pulled into a white gravel turnoff, shut off my lights. The road was dead quiet. 2 minutes later, I saw headlights. Same low-slung shape. White sedan. It didn't pull into the gravel. Just slowed down and kept going. I waited another 10 minutes, heart thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Then I pulled back onto the road, headed the opposite direction, circled back to the highway further west. And again, within 15 minutes, the white sedan was behind me. At that point I started talking out loud, just muttering things like, "What the hell is this? And why are you following me?" Like I was trying to hear myself make sense of it. I didn't have a weapon on me. Not even a pocket knife. Most nights I don't feel like I need one. Most nights, other truckers are the only ones I even see, and they're usually decent folks. I felt exposed in a way I haven't felt in years. I thought about calling the cops. But what would I even say? Someone in a white sedan is driving on the highway near me? That'd go nowhere. And even if they were following me, technically they hadn't done anything. Not yet. I kept driving, trying to think. My drop-off was still 2 hours away, and I had no idea if this person planned to follow me all the way there. What freaked me out wasn't just the following. It was the silence of it. No contact. No road rage. No one flashing brights or honking or shouting. Just watching. I tried losing them again. Took an off-ramp and drove into a residential neighborhood, quiet streets, dim orange streetlights. Wound through it for maybe 10 minutes, turning randomly. Then parked under a tree and killed the engine. Sat there, staring in the mirror. The sedan crept by 4 minutes later. Didn't stop. Just glided by like it didn't see me. I don't know why, but that somehow scared me more than if it had pulled up. It meant they were still looking. That I hadn't shaken them. That they were actively scanning for me. I stayed put another 20 minutes. Didn't see the sedan again. Thought maybe that was it. Maybe they gave up. I started driving again, slow, cautious. No headlights behind me for a while. Got back on the highway at a different ramp, way west of where I'd left it. 15, 20 minutes went by. Then, in the mirror, headlights. White sedan. That's when I stopped playing games. I called the state troopers. Told them I was being followed by a suspicious vehicle. Gave them my route, license plate, direction. They said they'd send someone to check it out. I didn't expect much, but at least it was logged. Then I pulled into a well-lit way station that I knew was staffed. Parked. Got out, walked into the office like I wasn't worried at all. Asked about inspection hours. Chatted. Made sure the guy behind the glass saw me, noted me. While I was talking, I saw it again. The sedan rolled past the station. Slow. Didn't stop. Didn't even hesitate. Just kept going. I waited another 10 minutes, then asked the guy if I could park there for a while. He didn't care. Said drivers crash there all the time. I sat in my cab and waited. Didn't move. Kept my lights off. After about 30 minutes, I started to relax. Maybe they gave up. Maybe seeing me talk to someone did the trick. I cracked a window and started unwrapping that sandwich from earlier. Then I saw it. Far back, down the highway, maybe 200 yards. Pulled off onto the shoulder, just barely in view of the station's floodlights. White sedan. Facing me. Not moving. I watched it for 10, maybe 15 minutes. It never got closer. Never backed up. just sat there, like it was waiting to see if I'd come back out. I was driving back from visiting my sister in Idaho. She just had her first baby, and I stayed longer than I planned, so I left around 9 at night instead of early morning like I meant to. I figured I'd make it to a motel by around 2 a.m. Not ideal, but I've done plenty of night driving before. I wasn't nervous or anything. I had a full tank, coffee, and true crime podcasts queued up, ironically. Around midnight, I had to pee pretty bad. I'd been holding it for a while, waiting for a real gas station or somewhere with lights, but I wasn't seeing much. Just dark two-lane highway, mile after mile. Finally, I saw one of those blue rest area signs. Just a basic pull-off. No services. I wasn't thrilled, but I figured I'd be quick. In and out. The place was tiny. Just 2 long truck parking lanes, a handful of regular spots, and a concrete building with bathrooms and vending machines. One lone sodium light buzzed over the building, casting that orange glow that never feels bright enough. The rest of the lot was mostly shadows. There were 3 semis parked in the truck section. No other cars. I parked under the light, just for peace of mind. Left my engine running and the driver's door locked, just unlocked the one I'd be coming back through. The second I stepped out, I felt, not afraid exactly, just aware. Like the silence was too heavy. No wind. No bugs. No hum of far-off cars. Just nothing. I walked briskly to the bathroom. Lights inside were flickering. The kind of flicker that makes you think about horror movies, even when you know better. I did my business fast, skipped washing my hands, gross, I know, and stepped back outside. That's when I heard it. A banging sound. Sharp, frantic. Metal on metal, from across the lot. I stopped in my tracks. I turned and saw a man mid-30s maybe, pounding both fists against the side of a semi-truck's cab. Not the trailer, the actual driver's cab. The truck was parked furthest from the building, near the tree line. He was shouting something, but I couldn't make it out at first. I hesitated, took a few steps toward my car, but the sound of his yelling got clearer as I moved closer. She's inside. She's inside. Call the cops. I froze. The way he was banging, desperate, like full body hits, wasn't right. I thought maybe it was a domestic situation. Maybe a woman locked herself inside to get away from him. Or maybe he was having a mental break. Either way, I didn't want to get close. He saw me then, whipped around and started half running, half stumbling toward me. Hey, please. She's trapped in there. I took a step back and said, "Who?" That was all I managed. He pointed back at the truck, breathing hard. He locked her in. She was yelling for help. I heard her. He locked her in the cab. "Please call 911. I didn't move. Didn't take my phone out. I was trying to make sense of it. He looked disheveled, shirt soaked through, scraped knuckles, dirty jeans. But his eyes were wide and terrified. Like he was scared of whatever was in that truck. "Why don't you call?" I asked. "My phone's in my car," he said. "I just stopped to pee. I wasn't even gonna stay, and I heard her screaming. I tried the door, but it's locked. Please, you have a phone, right?" He motioned for me to follow, already heading back toward the truck. I didn't move. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The truck he'd been banging on, the one with the supposed woman inside, it wasn't running. No lights on. No sound. But the side window curtain was open just a crack. Just enough that, if someone was watching from inside, they could see everything happening below. "I don't think I should get closer," I said, still standing near the bathroom. "What if the guy inside has a gun?" He stopped walking, turned slowly toward me. His expression changed, not angry, not threatening, but like he suddenly realized how this looked. Like it had just hit him. He raised his hands a little. Yeah, you're right. I didn't know what to do. I thought someone was getting hurt. I didn't think, He looked back at the truck. Can you just call the police? He asked, quieter now. I finally pulled my phone out and started dialing. As I did, I noticed a fourth truck at the far end of the lot, facing the opposite direction. It hadn't been there when I parked. No lights, no engine, just suddenly there. The man saw me glance past him and turned too. Is that new? He asked. I nodded. I didn't see it before. Neither of us said anything for a second. Then a light flicked on inside that new truck. Just the faint glow from the sleeper compartment. He turned back to me again, fast. Please call. Please. Something's wrong. The 911 dispatcher answered. I explained where I was, what I saw, and what the man had said. She asked if anyone had made threats or if I'd witnessed an altercation. No, I said. Just him banging on a truck and saying someone's locked inside. She told me to stay put, that a state trooper was en route. I told the man that help was coming. He nodded, rubbing his face like he was trying to hold himself together. Then we heard it. From the same truck he'd been banging on, just faint, but there a thud. Like someone shifting their weight inside. Or dropping something. We both looked at each other. Did you hear that? He asked. I nodded. He looked toward the truck again. That's the first noise in 10 minutes. Before, she was yelling. Now nothing. I stayed rooted. I was locked between wanting to help and every single instinct in me screaming, stay where you are. The dispatcher asked if I could still see the man. I said yes. Then she asked, can you see anyone in the truck? I looked again. The curtain in the truck was now completely shut. That slit that had been open? Gone. I told her. A few minutes later, red and blue lights came up the on-ramp. 2 troopers stepped out. They talked to the man, who repeated everything, what he heard, what he saw, how he tried to open the cab. One trooper knocked on the truck door, called out. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. Eventually they opened the door themselves. I stood back near the bathroom, hugging my arms, heart racing. They climbed up. One of them shouted something inside. I couldn't hear the response. Then they both went quiet. After a few minutes, one of them came down. He talked to the man for a while. I didn't catch much. The trooper looked serious, but not panicked. Later, I asked if everyone was okay. He said there was no one else in the truck. Just the driver. He was asleep. I asked, no woman? He shook his head. No. They kept talking to the man. Eventually, they asked for my statement. I gave it. They didn't seem suspicious of me or him, just confused. They let me go not long after. I don't know if the man imagined it, or if he really did hear something. He didn't strike me as crazy. Just panicked. Convicted. Like he knew what he'd heard. All I know is that when I drove off, I passed that 4th truck again. The one that showed up after me. The cabin light was still on. But no one was sitting in the driver's seat. It was around 3:30 in the afternoon when I saw him. Just past Barstow, heading east. I pulled off to stretch and check a weird noise coming from under the cab. Turned out to be nothing, just some loose straps. When I got back in, I saw this guy walking along the shoulder, maybe mid-30s, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. It was hot as hell, must have been 95. and the wind was dry enough to burn your skin. Normally, I don't pick people up. I've been driving long enough to know better. But I don't know, he didn't look sketchy. No sign, not trying to flag anybody. Just walking, sweating, keeping his head down. And I was tired. Not sleepy tired, just tired of the road. Tired of podcasts, tired of the same music I've heard 100 times. I guess I just wanted to talk to someone for a little while. I slowed down and gave a little honk. He turned, looked surprised. I motioned toward the passenger door. He jogged up. First thing he said was, "You sure?" Not like he was worried about me, but like he was the inconvenience. I told him, "Just don't bleed on my seats and we're good," trying to keep it light. He gave a tired smile and climbed in. Shook my hand. Name was Kyle. Said he was heading east, didn't say where exactly. "Wherever the road takes me," he said. I didn't press it. We drove for a while. He was quiet, but not awkward. Told me he used to work construction. Said he was trying to get to Colorado, maybe Wyoming. Talked about sleeping under bridges, said it like it was no big deal. He didn't ask for money, didn't try to sell me a sob story. Just rode along, looking out the window. At a truck stop near Needles, I asked if he wanted to grab something to eat. He said he was fine, but I insisted, figured it was the least I could do. He grabbed a sandwich and a bottle of water, thanked me again, real polite. That's when I figured I'd drop him off a little further down, maybe around Kingman, Arizona. I had a load to drop off just south of Flagstaff, so it wasn't out of the way. He seemed fine with that. "Wherever," he said again. After a while, I forgot he was even there. Just another body in the passenger seat. We didn't talk much after the food stop. He just stared ahead or nodded off here and there. It was getting dark by the time we hit the Arizona state line. I mentioned I'd be pulling into a rest area to sleep for a bit before finishing the run. Figured I'd let him out there, he could find another ride, or set up camp for the night. He didn't say anything at first, just kind of stared forward. Then, after a few seconds, he said, "I haven't reached my destination yet." I thought he was joking. Said something like, "Well, I ain't going to the Atlantic, so you might want to hop off soon." He didn't laugh. Just turned and looked at me. His face was not angry, not sad, just blank. Like he didn't understand what I was saying. "I'm not there yet," he said again, a little firmer. That's when the vibe changed. I kind of half laughed and said, "Well, man, I gotta sleep. I can drop you in Kingman. That's about as far as I'm going tonight." "No," he said. "I'm not getting out yet." I didn't say anything. Just kept driving. We got to the rest area maybe 20 minutes later. It was one of those small ones, just 2 rows of parking, a single bathroom building, a couple vending machines. Not many people there. One other semi, a minivan, and what looked like a pickup with a camper shell. I pulled into a spot, killed the engine. Didn't get out right away. Just sat there, trying to figure out how to deal with this guy. I turned to him and said, "Look, I'm gonna catch a few hours here. You can hang out, grab a drink or something, but I need the cab to myself." He didn't move. I said it again, more serious. Still nothing. He was just sitting there with his hands folded in his lap, staring at the windshield. I reached for the door handle. "All right. Come on, man. Time to go." That's when he said, "Do you know what's in those woods?" I paused. "What?" He looked over at the tree line, dead ahead past the parking lot. "You can't hear them now, but at night they come closer." His voice was steady. Not frantic. Not afraid. Just flat. I said, "Okay, well, I'm not staying up to meet them." "Out." Still didn't move. I got out of the cab, walked around to his side, opened the door. He just looked at me. "You sure?" he said again, same words he said when I first picked him up. I said, "Yeah. Get out." He didn't argue. Just picked up his duffel and stepped down. Walked toward the building without another word. I stayed up there for a bit, watching him go. He didn't look back. I climbed into the sleeper, locked the doors, and tried to settle in. I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept hearing little sounds, shifting gravel, the rattle of vending machine doors, faint footsteps. At one point, I sat up and peeked through the curtain. Kyle was sitting on the bench near the building. Not doing anything. Just sitting. Facing my truck. Under one of those buzzing yellow lights. I told myself he'd move on. That he'd hitch another ride. That maybe he was just a little off, but harmless. But every time I opened the curtain, he was still there. Same position. Same posture. Just staring. At around 2 a.m., the other semi pulled out. Not long after, the minivan left too. Kyle didn't move. Then, at 2:40 or so, the power went out. Not in the whole area, just the building. The outside lights shut off. Vending machines, bathrooms, everything. Like someone hit a breaker. That's when I lost sight of him. I stared into the dark for a long time. My heart was going crazy. I kept listening for footsteps, for banging on the door, but it never came. Then, real quiet, I heard the crunch of gravel somewhere behind the truck. Just once. Then nothing. I slid into the driver's seat, engine off, trying to stay low. Tried to look out the side mirror, but couldn't see much. Then I heard the passenger door handle. Just a soft rattle. Once. Twice. Then silence again. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, I turned the key. Headlights came on, nothing in front of me. I turned the cab lights on, no one inside. I threw it into drive and peeled out of the lot faster than I probably should have. Didn't look back. Didn't stop. I didn't see another car for miles. I kept checking the mirrors every few seconds, expecting to see headlights that matched the ones from earlier, or worse, nothing at all, just someone clinging to the back of the trailer. I didn't stop again until sunrise. I did a full walk around of the truck. No signs of anything. Doors all sealed. Back trailer locked up tight. I don't know what Kyle's deal was. Maybe he was just mentally ill. Maybe he was messing with me. Maybe he thought he had to be there, like some made-up mission in his head. But I've picked up a few hitchhikers since then. Not many. Only when I really have to. But I never let them in the cab for long. And I always lock the doors when I sleep. I drive a 2020 Freightliner, mostly long hauls through the Midwest and South. Been doing this almost 8 years now, solo. I've gotten used to sleeping in the cab, used to truck stop food, used to silence. I actually like it. The quiet's kind of the whole point for me. This happened about a year ago, just outside of Amarillo. It was early March, still cold at night. I'd picked up a load in Albuquerque that was heading east, and I had a little wiggle room in the schedule. I figured I'd get a few hours of sleep before pushing into Oklahoma. There's this rest area about 40 minutes outside of Amarillo, nothing fancy, but it's always pretty empty, which I like. I've been there before, no issues. That night, I pulled in around 11:45 p.m. There were 2 other semis already parked, both dark, no sign of life. One car way at the end, probably someone sleeping like me. The wind was blowing hard, and there was a dusting of snow on the ground, not enough to stick but enough to leave smears on the asphalt. I locked up like I always do. Driver's side door first, then passenger side, then I checked both again. Call it habit or paranoia, but I always double check. Especially when I'm out in the middle of nowhere like that. It's just easier to sleep when I know everything's shut tight. I climbed into the sleeper, pulled the curtain, and laid down with my jacket over me. I keep the sleeper pretty minimal. Just a pillow, a blanket I barely use, and a little clip-on fan I run for white noise. I usually leave my boots on the floor by the bed, keys and wallet in the overhead cubby. I woke up to cold air hitting my face. That was the first thing. Cold air, and this sound like plastic flapping. I opened my eyes, not all the way awake yet. Everything felt off. The white noise was gone. The fan had shut off. I sat up. The curtain was still drawn, but I could see light from the cab leaking in around the edges. Not normal. I always turn everything off. That's when I noticed the breeze. Not just cold moving air, like from outside. I leaned forward, pushed the curtain aside, and just sat there for a second trying to understand what I was looking at. The passenger side door was wide open. Not cracked. Open. All the way. The dome light was on, weak and yellow, and the cold air was blowing in hard. My dash was lit up. That annoying door ajar alert was blinking. I didn't move right away. Just stared at it. My heart hadn't caught up to my brain yet. I was still half asleep, trying to convince myself I'd messed up and forgot to lock it. But I never forget to lock the doors. I check them. I always check them. And then I looked down. Right between the seats, leading from the step up to the cab, were muddy footprints. Just two. One on the passenger side floor mat, the other half on the mat, half on the plastic edge that leads to the sleeper. Then one more. Right next to my boots. There weren't any on the driver's side. Just those three, coming in. None going back out. The worst part? They were wet. Fresh. I reached up and yanked the curtain all the way back. Looked around the sleeper like someone might still be in there with me. But it was empty. Nothing. Still, I checked under the bed, behind the seats, even opened the storage cubbies, which doesn't even make sense now that I think about it, like a full-grown person could hide in a space barely big enough for a duffel bag. I leaned out and shut the door. Locked it. Then I sat back down on the edge of the bed, staring at the footprints. I didn't know what to do. Calling the cops felt ridiculous. Hey, someone opened my truck door and stepped inside, maybe. What would they even do? I looked out the windows. The other trucks were still parked. No one moving. No lights on. It was dead quiet except for the wind. I kept thinking, if someone got in, they had to have left. I mean, they weren't there now. And if they did leave, I didn't hear it. I didn't feel the truck shift. Nothing woke me up until the cold air hit. But the footprints didn't make sense. If they left, or were the ones going out? I got up, unlocked the driver's door, and stepped outside. Walked around to the other side. There were more footprints. In the snow-dusted dirt, leading away from my truck. Not a lot. Just 2 or 3, heading off toward the tree line that runs along the back edge of the rest stop. They weren't boots. They were bare feet. Long, narrow, toes spread out like whoever it was had been walking barefoot for a while. The prints were clean, deep enough to show weight. And then they just stopped. Maybe 15 feet from the truck, in the dirt, the prints ended. Nothing past that. Like the person walked into the trees and vanished. I didn't follow. I just stood there, looking out into the dark. I couldn't see anything past the first row of trees. It was too dark. I walked back around, got in the cab, locked both doors again. Checked them 3 times. I thought about starting the engine and leaving, but my clock was maxed out for driving hours. If I got pulled over or hit a way station, I'd be screwed. So I sat there. Eventually I lay back down, fully dressed, curtain wide open, keys in hand. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I waited until full daylight before getting out again. The footprints in the cab were dry by then, but still there. Smudged, muddy outlines on the gray vinyl. I got out, checked the ground again. The ones in the dirt were gone, blown away or melted from the sun. The other trucks were still there, but one had a new driver in it. I knocked on his door and asked if he'd been there all night. He said no, he pulled in around 5 a.m. I cleaned the prints off the floor with some bottled water and napkins from a truck stop later that day. Didn't tell anyone. Not dispatch, not my brother, who I usually talk to on longer runs. I didn't want the story out there. Didn't want people thinking I'd been asleep with the door unlocked. Or worse, thinking I was going crazy. But I've thought about it a lot. Someone opened that door, came inside, took 3 steps toward my bed, then left somehow without making a sound or leaving a trail back out. I lock the doors differently now. I jam a steel rod between the door handles, just in case the lock fails or someone tries to pop it. I sleep with a crowbar next to the bed. And I don't park at that rest area anymore. I drive a 2019 Kenworth T680, mostly long hauls through the Midwest and South. Been doing this almost 8 years now, solo. I've gotten used to sleeping in the cab, used to truck stop food, used to silence. I actually like it. The quiet's kind of the whole point for me. This happened about a year ago, just outside of Amarillo. It was early March, still cold at night. I'd picked up a load in Albuquerque that was heading east, and I had a little wiggle room in the schedule. I figured I'd get a few hours of sleep before pushing into Oklahoma. There's this rest area about 40 minutes outside of Amarillo, nothing fancy, but it's always pretty empty, which I like. I've been there before, no issues. That night, I pulled in around 11:45 p.m. There were 2 other semis already parked, both dark, no sign of life. One car way at the end, probably someone sleeping like me. The wind was blowing hard, and there was a dusting of snow on the ground, not enough to stick but enough to leave smears on the asphalt. I locked up like I always do. Driver's side door first, then passenger side, then I check both again. Call it habit or paranoia, but I always double check. Especially when I'm out in the middle of nowhere like that. It's just easier to sleep when I know everything's shut tight. I climbed into the sleeper, pulled the curtain, and laid down with my jacket over me. I keep the sleeper pretty minimal. Just a pillow, a blanket I barely use, and a little clip-on fan I run for white noise. I usually leave my boots on the floor by the bed, keys and wallet in the overhead cubby. I woke up to cold air hitting my face. That was the first thing. Cold air, and this sound like plastic flapping. I opened my eyes, not all the way awake yet. Everything felt off. The white noise was gone. The fan had shut off. I sat up. The curtain was still drawn, but I could see light from the cab leaking in around the edges. Not normal. I always turn everything off. That's when I noticed a breeze. Not just cold moving air, like from outside. I leaned forward, pushed the curtain aside, and just sat there for a second trying to understand what I was looking at. The passenger side door was wide open. Not cracked. Open. All the way. The dome light was on, weak and yellow, and the cold air was blowing in hard. My dash was lit up. That annoying door ajar alert was blinking. I didn't move right away. Just stared at it. My heart hadn't caught up to my brain yet. I was still half asleep, trying to convince myself I'd messed up and forgot to lock it. But I never forget to lock the doors. I checked them. I always check them. And then I looked down. Right between the seats, leading from the step up to the cab, were muddy footprints. Just two. One on the passenger side floor mat, the other half on the mat, half on the plastic edge that leads to the sleeper. Then one more. Right next to my boots. There weren't any on the driver's side. Just those three, coming in. None going back out. The worst part? They were wet. Fresh. I reached up and yanked the curtain all the way back. Looked around the sleeper like someone might still be in there with me. But it was empty. Nothing. Still, I checked under the bed, behind the seats, even opened the storage cubbies, which doesn't even make sense now that I think about it, like a full-grown person could hide in a space barely big enough for a duffel bag. I leaned out and shut the door. Locked it. Then I sat back down on the edge of the bed, staring at the footprints. I didn't know what to do. Calling the cops felt ridiculous. Hey, someone opened my truck door and stepped inside, maybe. What would they even do? I looked out the windows. The other trucks were still parked. No one moving. No lights on. It was dead quiet except for the wind. I kept thinking, if someone got in, they had to have left. I mean, they weren't there now. And if they did leave, I didn't hear it. I didn't feel the truck shift. Nothing woke me up until the cold air hit. But the footprints didn't make sense. If they left, or were the ones going out? I got up, unlocked the driver's door, and stepped outside. Walked around to the other side. There were more footprints. In the snow-dusted dirt, leading away from my truck. Not a lot. Just 2 or 3, heading off toward the tree line that runs along the back edge of the rest stop. They weren't boots. They were bare feet. Long, narrow, toes spread out like whoever it was had been walking barefoot for a while. The prints were clean, deep enough to show weight. And then they just stopped. Maybe 15 feet from the truck, in the dirt, the prints ended. Nothing past that. Like the person walked into the trees and vanished. I didn't follow. I just stood there, looking out into the dark. I couldn't see anything past the first row of trees. It was too dark. I walked back around, got in the cab, locked both doors again. Checked them 3 times. I thought about starting the engine and leaving, but my clock was maxed out for driving hours. If I got pulled over or hit a way station, I'd be screwed. So I sat there. Eventually I laid back down, fully dressed, curtain wide open, keys in hand. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I waited until full daylight before getting out again. The footprints in the cab were dry by then, but still there. Smudged, muddy outlines on the gray vinyl. I got out, checked the ground again. The ones in the dirt were gone, blown away or melted from the sun. The other trucks were still there, but one had a new driver in it. I knocked on his door and asked if he'd been there all night. He said no, he pulled in around 5 a.m. I cleaned the prints off the floor with some bottled water and napkins from a truck stop later that day. Didn't tell anyone. Not dispatch, not my brother, who I usually talk to on longer runs. I didn't want the story out there. Didn't want people thinking I'd been asleep with the door unlocked. Or worse, thinking I was going crazy. But I've thought about it a lot. Someone opened that door, came inside, took 3 steps toward my bed, then left somehow without making a sound or leaving a trail back out. I lock the doors differently now. I jam a steel rod between the door handles, just in case the lock fails or someone tries to pop it. I sleep with a crowbar next to the bed, and I don't park at that rest area anymore. My car broke down on a back road in Tennessee around 6 in the evening. I remember the time because it was just starting to get dark, but not dark enough to freak me out yet. I'd taken a wrong turn off the main highway trying to find a gas station. Waze had said there was one a few miles off the exit. There wasn't. Instead, I ended up on some 2-lane road that ran past empty fields and rusted-out barns. No signs, no cell service. After about 15 minutes of driving with nothing in sight, my engine sputtered, made this ugly knocking sound, and the car just died. I coasted to the gravel shoulder, put on my hazards, and sat there. I waited maybe 20 minutes, just hoping another car would come by. I didn't want to get out. I wasn't dressed for walking, leggings, old sweatshirt, and slip-ons. No jacket. I was cold. It was dead quiet except for the ticks of the engine cooling off. Then I saw headlights coming from the opposite direction. A big rig, older-looking Peterbilt, kind of beat up. I stood up and waved my arms. The driver slowed and stopped right next to me. Window rolled down, and this guy leaned out. Late 50s maybe, heavy, scruffy beard. His hat said something about auto parts. He looked normal enough. "You okay?" he asked. I told him my car died and I didn't have signal. He nodded, like he saw that sort of thing all the time. "Ain't much out here. Closest garage is about 10 miles that way," he pointed behind me. "I can take you." I hesitated. But what choice did I have? It was either him or stay out there all night, alone, with no heat. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and locked the car. He reached across the cab and pushed the door open. The truck smelled like old fast food and diesel, which I expected. There was a half-empty bottle of Mountain Dew in the cup holder, some crumpled receipts, and a faded photo of a little girl taped to the dash. She looked maybe 5. "Don't mind the mess," he said, chuckling. "Ain't had a co-pilot in a while." He told me his name was Ray. Said he was local, used to run longer hauls but stuck to regional stuff now. Talked a lot, mostly about traffic, truck stops, weather. I nodded along, trying to keep calm. He didn't do anything weird. Didn't ask anything too personal. Just drove. After maybe 15 minutes, he flicked his blinker on and turned onto this gravel road. No signs, no lights. Just trees on both sides and barely enough space for the truck. "This don't look like a main road," I said. "It ain't." "It's a shortcut," he said. "Garage is just up ahead." I didn't say anything, but I kept looking around. The trees were thick. No houses, no other cars. Just woods and that road. A few minutes later, we came around a bend and I saw it, an old building with a rusted-out sign that said service. One gas pump out front, cracked windows, roof saggy. It looked wrong. Not just old. Abandoned. Ray pulled in and stopped. "This is it," he said, like it was nothing. I didn't move. "This place open?" "Yeah," he said, but he didn't sound convincing. "Buddy of mine runs it. Probably in the back." He hopped down from the truck and started toward the building. He didn't wait for me. Just walked up and pushed the door open like he'd been there 1,000 times. I stayed where I was. I didn't want to go in. A minute passed. Then another. I looked around. No lights on. No sound. Just the wind in the trees and the ticking of the truck's engine. I climbed down from the cab and stood there. My skin felt tight, like something was about to happen but hadn't yet. I looked at the building again. The door was half open. Still no lights. I called out, "Ray?" No answer. I waited 30 more seconds, then I took a step toward the door. That's when I heard it. Something scraped against the inside wall, like metal on concrete. Not loud, just a little SHKRRK, then silence. I froze. Then I heard it again, closer to the door this time. I turned around fast and climbed back into the cab, slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking. I looked around the cab, keys were still in the ignition. I didn't think. I just turned the key. The truck rumbled back to life. I put it in gear, thank God I knew how from a friend who drove, and pulled out onto the gravel. Tires crunched loud. I thought I saw movement in the doorway, but I didn't look too hard. I backed out onto the road, hit the gas, and didn't stop driving for a long time. Eventually I found a proper town, maybe 20 miles away. Pulled into a gas station and just sat there. I told the clerk inside I needed a tow, and he helped me call one. He asked where I came from, and I tried to describe the road, the garage, the guy. He just blinked and said, "Ain't been a shop out there in years." The tow truck took me back to my car. Battery was dead. Nothing else wrong with it. He jumped it, and it started like nothing happened. I never reported it. I wouldn't even know what to say. But I wonder, who was the kid in the photo? Was she real? Was that even his truck? Or did he find it, like he found me? I was hauling a load of auto parts from Kansas City to Denver, just another routine run. It was early October, and the weather was starting to turn. The days were still warm, but the nights had that crisp chill that hinted at the coming winter. I had stopped at a small truck stop off I-70 in western Kansas. It was one of those places that had seen better days, faded signs, a couple of ancient gas pumps, and a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. But it was quiet, and I needed a break. After grabbing a bite to eat and topping off the tank, I did my usual walk-around inspection. Everything seemed in order. I climbed back into the cab, ready to hit the road again. That's when I noticed the note. It was a small piece of paper, folded neatly and wedged into the seam of the trailer door. I pulled it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, like someone had written it in a hurry. It read, "Medium. She's still alive. Hurry." I stood there for a moment, staring at the note. My first thought was that it was some kind of prank. But who would go to the trouble? And why? I looked around the parking lot. There were a couple of other trucks, but no one seemed to be paying me any attention. The diner was empty except for the waitress and a man nursing a cup of coffee at the counter. I checked the trailer door. The seal was intact, and the lock hadn't been tampered with. Still, I decided to open it up and take a look inside. The cargo was just as it should be, pallets of boxed auto parts, all secured and undisturbed. I climbed into the trailer and walked along the narrow aisle between the pallets, shining my flashlight into the corners. Nothing. No signs of anyone hiding or having been inside. I climbed back out, closed the door, and stood there for a moment, holding the note. It didn't make any sense. I considered throwing it away, but something about it bothered me. I folded it up and stuck it in my pocket. Back in the cab, I sat for a moment, thinking. I didn't feel right about just driving off. But what was I supposed to do? Call the police and tell them someone left a cryptic note on my trailer? They'd think I was crazy. I decided to wait a bit, see if anyone came around. Maybe someone had left the note by mistake and would come back looking for it. But after an hour, there was still no sign of anyone. I finally started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. But the note stayed on my mind. I kept glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see someone or something following me. But the road was empty. That night, I parked at a rest area just outside of Denver. It was well lit and had a few other trucks parked there. I locked up the cab and settled in for the night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a tapping sound. It was faint, but persistent. I sat up and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the trailer. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of the cab. The night was cold, and the air was still. I walked around to the back of the trailer. The tapping had stopped. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing. I checked the lock. Still secure. I shined the flashlight around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I walked back to the cab, feeling uneasy. I didn't sleep much the rest of the night. The next morning, I delivered the load to the warehouse in Denver. The receiving clerk signed off on the delivery, and I told him about the note. He looked at me like I was nuts. Probably some kids messing around, he said. I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. I kept the note. It's still in my glove compartment. Every now and then, I take it out and look at it, wondering who wrote it and what it meant. I never found out. I've been driving trucks for almost 15 years, so I've seen my fair share of weird things. But this one still gets to me. It wasn't even that long ago, maybe 6 months, and I haven't been able to shake it since. I was coming off a long haul from St. Louis to some small industrial town just outside of Denver. The trailer I was hauling was unmarked, just a plain white box, nothing special. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Sometimes they do that when they don't want people knowing what's inside, and you get used to it in the business. You get a load, you haul it, you drop it off. That's how it works. I got to the place around 10 p.m., and it was a lot quieter than I expected. The warehouse was tucked away at the edge of town, a small, rundown place. The lights were on, but the parking lot was mostly empty. The kind of place where you'd think a lot of stuff happens late at night. Big steel gates, high walls, no sign of any security. I pulled up to the dock and stopped. As I was getting out of the truck, I looked around. Something about the place just felt off, you know? The silence was weird. I didn't hear the usual sounds you expect at a warehouse, no forklifts, no other trucks, nothing. The loading bay door was cracked open, maybe a foot or so. I thought it was strange. Usually, they keep it closed until the driver's ready to back in. I figured they might have been busy, but it didn't sit right with me. I got out, walked toward the building, and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. So, I moved over to the loading bay door, and that's when I saw it. Through the crack in the door, there was a figure, someone moving on the other side. At first, I thought it was just a worker. But as I got closer, I could see more clearly. There was a man standing there, pressed up against the door, his face pale, covered in blood. He was trying to signal me, raising one hand in small, jerky motions, like he wanted to get my attention. I froze for a second. My first thought was that maybe he had an accident or something, but the blood, it didn't look like it was from any kind of minor injury. It was smeared all over his face, neck, and hands, dark and sticky. I could barely make out his features. His eyes were wide, and his mouth was open, but there was no sound coming from him. I didn't know what to do. The first instinct I had was to walk away, to get back to my truck and call the cops, but I couldn't move. The guy, he was looking at me so desperately, like he was trying to tell